Welcome to Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup. I'm your host, Jason Bland, and tonight we have one of my favorite guests. We've had him on several times. I'm reading his book right now, The Eden Conspiracy by Paul Anthony Wallis. Ancient Memories of E.T. Contact and the Bible Before God. Yes, we're talking ancient aliens, people. Paleocontact, one of my favorite subjects. I can't wait to get into it with Paul. This book is definitely worth picking up. If you've never picked up any of Paul's book, he's got a number we're going to go talk about tonight. He's got another one coming out here soon, Invasion of Eden. That sounds awesome. I really enjoy this topic. Paul's one of the most well-spoken people I've ever had on this show on the topic. And I've had a lot of good guests on this topic, but Paul's number one in my book on this. He covers it so clearly. We get down to the brass tacks of the meaning. He has his YouTube channel. You're definitely going to want to check out if you have not heard of Paul Anthony Wallis, Fifth Kind TV. Definitely check that out. We will open up the phone lines later in the show, of course, so you can call in and ask questions of our guest Paul tonight. Just hang in there. That'll be later in the show. And, of course, we got a ton of weird to get to. 2024 is already starting off to be pretty weird. Yeah, new year, new weird, I guess. I don't know. Yes, I'm going to get into the Miami alien and the mall thing. I'm saving that to last. Just hang on. A lot to get to tonight, so let's go ahead and get rolling on into it. Welcome to another night of Paranormal Soup. As I said before, I'm your host, Jason Bland. Tonight's guest, Paul Anthony Wallis, is actually going to join us for the World Wide Web of Weird tonight. We want to catch up here with you. How you doing tonight, Paul?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I'm doing fantastically. G'day from Australia. It's great to be with you again, Jace. How you going?
Yes. Jealous seeing all the nice sun. We're pre-show. He's sitting there fanning himself because he's so hot. And here I am, like, turning down my furnace so it doesn't run. Because I got snow in winter. Night here, winter, summer, hot there. Gotta love that. It's time travel. It's time travel. Join me from another place that's a lot warmer than here is my beautiful co-host, is Jamie D. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
Doing good, thank you.
I know you're excited to have Paul on. Your mom's a big fan. I don't know how anybody isn't a big fan of Paul. Honestly, don't. You got to get into the ancient alien stuff. Come on. Joining me from another place that's much warmer than where I am, just all you guys rub it in, is Rob Autry himself from Florida. How you doing tonight, Rob?
Good. It's a little chilly here tonight.
Well, what's chilly to you?
I don't know. It's like 50.
Kiss my, you know what?
Yeah. So that's why I live in Florida.
What temp is
a sweatshirt?
What temp is it in Australia?
Oh, it's probably about 33, not of your degrees, of course.
No, that's more like here. Yeah, like 80.
Pretty warm.
Yeah, pretty hot. Enjoy, all of you enjoy. You can come have my snow any day, but enough of me complaining. We got a lot of weird to get to. Right? We got a lot of weird to get to, so let's go ahead and roll into the World Wide Web of Weird. Tonight on the World Wide Web of Weird, we got a lot of weird to get to because we've been off a lot for the holidays. Of course, if you missed last Sunday, we did a Mandela Effect New Year's special. And I saw a lot of people commenting like, I thought the show was 3 hours. Wherever. If you read the description of the show, it told you 1 hour. And I actually went over 1 hour. But we had a lot of fun. We've been gone for a couple weeks. We got a lot of weird to get to. And of course, aliens in Miami always starting out the year on the first day of the year, right? We'll get to that. I'm saving that to the end. First off, let's go ahead and cover House Member Says 10 classified briefing on subject of UFOs. Woo! For those listening on the Paranormal Radio Network, on the Paranormal Radio app, on Talkstream Live, it's Paranormal Soup radio channel there. We are a webcast. We stream out live to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, where we do show videos and pictures, which we do have some stuff tonight, so you can join us there. Rob, you got the share screen? I saw it up a minute ago. Now I don't see it. There it is. All right. So, members of the House Oversight Committee will receive classified information concerning the phenomenon. According to reports, the briefing, which will take place next Tuesday at the Office of House of Security, will be conducted by Thomas A. Mohane, Inspector General of the United States Intelligence Community. The move follows a request put forward back in August by a bipartisan group of Oversight Committee members led by Representative Tim Burchett, who wanted to know if the U.S. military was in possession of recovered UFOs or had been working on to reverse engineer captured extraterrestrial technology. Sadly, though, we won't get to find out exactly what information the group will be given at the next weekend's briefing because that whole thing will be classified. The subject of UFOs has been a major point of debate, blah, blah, blah. We ain't going to get all that. So, how many of you think we're going to hear a damn thing that comes out of that classified briefing because it's classified? I think this is where this thing dies. That's where I think. Do you think this thing dies here in the classified briefing, or does it continue to snowball? Maybe it continues to snowball.
Thomas Monheim is a clever guy. He'll have an end game in mind.
That's what I thought.
But at the same time, he is one of the figures in the military intelligence community who is in a forward-leaning posture with regard to how much disclosure there should be. So I think it's a story worth watching.
Oh yeah. It's just interesting. I'm waiting to see what happens when they come out of this classified briefing. If there's certain, it seems like Tim Burchett and Representative Luna and a number of others are really pursuing this. They're a dog with a bone and they're going after it.
So are they actually letting Tim Burchett into this conversation? That's wow. Well, look, that's progress.
We'll see what happens. I honestly think he'll come back if he, and continue it if he sees enough evidence. Or they're gonna, like you said, have something prepared that's gonna make up. I mean, remember, Jimmy Carter as president was supposed to reveal UFOs, and the supposed story is they gave him information and he cried, and we never found out. So I don't know. We'll see.
Well, Tim Burchett has been so bullish on this topic publicly, for the last few months. I mean, just watching the expression on his face, the tone of his voice, his body language next time he's in front of a camera will be very telling. But and for all those reasons, I'm really interested that they are reading him in on something. So I am very.
He seems like he won't let it go.
He seems that way, doesn't he? Yeah.
But unlike that bill that got passed recently where they basically gutted the whole thing to make it meaningless, that's where I'm a bit suspect.
Yes. Well, I'm not surprised by that. And as I say, I think when there is an escalation of public conversation, I think the powers always have an end game in mind, where they want this to reach and not beyond.
Well, next up on the Worldwide Web of Weird, continuing on with government and UFOs, we got this one, and this is a few weeks old, but we've been gone, kind of, is mystery object spotted over Air Force One during Biden's Los Angeles visit. The peculiar sighting took place earlier this month on December 10th after U.S. President Joe Biden had arrived in Los Angeles above Air Force One. Brothers Peter and Joshua of YouTube channel LA Flights had been live streaming the activity, and there's a YouTube video, you can go watch it, where they, it's that you see the scene really quickly fly by. This is like a photograph of a spherical ball, could be anything. But it is interesting. I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's so fast. I don't think it could be, I don't think it's a bug. It does look like it's up there, but you hear him in the video say, "You saw that? You got something flying in the way." They see it with their eyes. So that's a clue to me that this is something. The mystery object showed up, in fact, at least 3 times, prompting speculation from the internet users who had been watching on the live stream. Repeated experiences of the object, coupled with the proximity of the Air Force One, even managed to draw the interest of major news outlets such as USA Today. I have a warning for aliens up for this next one, though. You might not want to fly close to our planes anymore. That might not be so nice. Scientists, this is Article 3, come up with a new type of jet fuel made out of poop. Yes, I'm not joking. Made out of excrement, the more scientifically sounding. These days, scientists are always on the lookout for novel and effective new ways to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, and the latest invention certainly qualifies as one of those most unique ways we've seen to date. Based in Gloucestershire, England, Firefly Green Fuels has discovered a way to turn ordinary human waste into biofuel that's almost identical to fuel typically used in jet planes. Not only that, but it produces 92% less carbon dioxide than regular jet fuel. We wanted to find a really low-value feedstock that was highly abundant, said CEO James Highgate. To create the biofuel, the firm uses a process known as hydrothermal liquefaction, which involves applying a combination of high pressure and heat to convert the waste into bio-crude oil. Kerosene can then be extracted from it using fractional distillation. According to the company, it would take the sewage produced by around 10,000 people to create enough fuel to fly a typical passenger airline from London to New York. That's a lot of poop. That's a lot of poop to get a plane in the air. I mean, we produce a lot of poop all the time, I'm sure. I mean, we can turn it into a fuel, I guess. I don't know. They say it's got less polluting, maybe. I don't know. What does it smell? That's what everybody's question. I just picture this, people sitting on the plane going.
Great potential there, because there's an endless supply ultimately. But I think unless the oil companies get hold of that technology and run with it, it's unlikely to go far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. Poop can only go so far.
I mean, it would be great. I mean, wouldn't it be good though if the oil companies thought, well, here's another potential source of revenue, and
dump help fuel that flight up there.
That's right.
Yeah, we got it. Go ahead.
The part where it's about 1 year's worth of everybody, I think in Britain, used together would be like 5% of the.
It would never add up.
Total. Now, would that put methane into the air by any chance, or with them like liquefying it? Is that still releasing?
Yeah, like the process of making it into kerosene for the jets. How bad polluting is that?
Get rid of cows because of the cow farts. Global warming. I was just wondering what that would do to the global, global warming crisis.
Well, if they could make money off of it, then
Then they'll do it.
Exactly. Don't worry about it, man.
It's a good question.
We got to get rid of the cows so they can feed us that synthetically grown meat from cancer cells. Yum.
Mm-hmm.
They just opened up the first Colorado self-automated McDonald's. Like no employees. They took your jibs. That's going to be pumping out artificial meat soon enough.
Mosquito burgers.
I mean, basically, it's 3D printing it, I think, there. All right, let's move on. Just to show that we're still in the Stone Age. Next up. Metaphysical shop owner plans to sue over Pennsylvania fortune-telling law. The owner of a Pennsylvania metaphysical shop received a visit from police earlier this year. Reportedly plans to file a lawsuit, good for them, over what they contend is an unconstitutional ban on fortune-telling in the state. The peculiar case began back in October when Beck Lawrence newly opened Serpent Key Shop and Sanctuary in the community of Hanover caught the attention of local authorities following a newspaper profile wherein they mentioned offering tarot card readings. This prompted Police Chief Chad Martin to stop into the shop with a warning that Pennsylvania law prohibits such divination. Lawrence subsequently detailed the weird encounter with the cops in a series of TikTok videos, which led to the story being picked up by news outlets across the country. Still perturbed by what had occurred, the metaphysical shop owner enlisted attorney Alexa Gravasi, who echoed her consternation over the situation. I was shocked that this law is still on the books in Pennsylvania. She marveled to a local TV station, observing that it was first written 1861. You know, I mean, I think it violates her it says here, violates her 14th Amendment. Yeah.
I'm not an American, but I thought the founding fathers of Pennsylvania went there for freedom of religion.
Right? Well, you know, they were all dead by then, by 1861. And then you had a lot of people making laws back in the late 1800s that were very not constitutional.
Yeah, it sounds
just because they're not on the books, because nobody ever took it to court, and it goes to court, it gets shot down. So they you know, state legislature should just take care of that now.
That's sad.
And not let police officers go into this woman's business and threaten her religious beliefs. That's what they did. That's what these guys did. They walked in there, and, you know, they didn't have to do that. They could have ignored that law on the books.
Exactly. I mean, they must have run out of criminals to
respect my authority.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like, you don't have other crimes to worry about right now. You know, you don't have 10-foot aliens walking down your street, I know, or in your shopping malls, but you do got stuff going on, I'm sure. That's more important than some lady giving tarot readings. Pisses me off that we still have that. You know, I know these stupid laws are in the books, but it pisses me off that these cops wasted their time, threatened somebody's constitutional rights. For what? For what? Because they don't agree, or they believe, you know, they have a different religious belief? Well, F you.
Yeah.
Or America. Okay. All right, yes, I'm going to get to the Miami alien and the mall theme, but let's move on to some other creatures. We got some Sasquatch sightings. Series of Sasquatch sightings in Virginia community prompt police response. See, these police have to respond to Sasquatch sightings. All right? You know, you could have that. Serious suspected Sasquatch sighting in Virginia community prompted the local police department to issue a statement wherein they revealed that the creature was merely a prankster in a costume, according to a local media report. The odd flap occurred last month when several people in the town of Wintergreen either spotted what appeared to be a Bigfoot in the wild or inadvertently captured photos of an elusive cryptid by the way of their doorbell cameras. It would seem that the sightings were so prevalent that the word of the weird series of events eventually reached the town's police department, which was forced to take social media and clear up the matter. On a post on Facebook, the Wintergreen Police Department explained that the sightings were in fact fake, and that the individual beneath the Bigfoot costume was just trying to have a little fun and create a little lighthearted conversation. Extrapolating on the situation to a local TV station, Chief Dennis Russell mused that I think he just wanted to maybe elevate people's happiness during the holiday season. Noting that the prankster antics were not illegal, he indicated that while the department did not tell him to stop running around the community dressed as a Sasquatch, the Fox Bigfoot has likely decided to hang up the costume for now before things take a troubling turn should someone spot him and think he has a chance to take down the famed cryptid at last. That's what I've always said. You got to have some balls to fake Bigfoot because you get shot. You get shot so bad. Like, I don't recommend it for your safety to fake Bigfoot. Plus, you're a jerk. I hate all people who fake stuff. Pranksters, I can't stand them. I can't stand them. You'll find out why here soon. Because, you know, we're trying to find out if Bigfoot's real. Please don't prank it. Shout out to my old cold worker, Jason, out there. Another Jason I worked with. Sent me a Bigfoot video I got to look into. I don't know. It's a TikTok video. I don't know. But this Bigfoot's like tearing it up. Like he's smashing stuff with picking up a telephone pole, literally, and throwing it, smashing stuff. Like, I'm like, okay, I got to look into this. Haven't had to yet. So that would have been a good Bigfoot story, not that one. Maybe. Who knows? All right, next up. So we got some more shenanigans in Argentina. Goblin shenanigans. Goblins. Peculiar piece of security footage from Argentina shows a small shadowy figure sprinting alongside the road, and some believe that the eerie runner was a goblin. According to a local media report, the strange scene unfolded on Christmas Eve in the town of Jose de San Martin and was captured by a camera connected to the home of a police officer in the community. The puzzling footage begins with a dog furiously barking as it stands at the front gate of a house. Seconds later, a seemingly hunched-over figure runs down the road with such tremendous speed it appears blurry in the video. Upon being posted online, the video quickly went viral on social media in Argentina, with various theories being offered for what the security camera captured. Some speculated that the figure could be a goblin of Latin American lore known as a duende. I don't know if I got that right. That said, not everyone was convinced of the explanation, as more skeptical observers argued that the creature was simply a person who appeared to look unusual due to the distance of light. I don't agree with that, or CGI. All right, go ahead and play it. Roll that beautiful goblin footage. I don't know, I thought I had audio in this, I don't know. But you hear the dog barking, and then this scene runs across. I think I have a zoom in of it, but not that you really can tell. It looks too short to be a person.
A mouse? A mouse with a shadow?
No, it's bigger than that. What I'm interested in, what catches my eye, so here it goes. If you go, it's almost translucent. So could it be digital manipulation or something? Because my problem with it is the dog. The dog in your video, we don't have the audio going, but in the video you can hear him barking and barking and barking. So he's obviously seeing something to catch his attention. But if you watch it, we go back to the beginning of the video, you see the dog doesn't turn when it runs. You don't see it like react.
I thought it was a countertop at first.
Yeah, see the dog there in the corner. He's wagging his tail. He's barking at something, but I don't know. Maybe he turns his head a little bit there. It's hard to see because he's behind the pillar, but it doesn't seem like he's turning his body. You don't think he'd turn his body sideways to it or keep it sideways to it if it was, something freaking it out. And he's still looking at something else the other way. So that makes me a little suspect that this could be a digital manipulation. You can see it's transparent at times. Digicabra. Copyrighted by Todd Reinhardt, Resident A-hole. We miss you, Todd. All right, let's get on to the Miami thing. I had my boss send me this. I'm like, yeah, I'm looking into this. Like, I already have a bad feeling. So an incident in Miami shopping mall, which resulted in the arrest of 4 teenagers, listen, hear that, 4 teenagers, earlier this week has sparked the spread of a bizarre theory on social media, which suggests that the alleged presence of aliens at the Florida establishment, I mean, this was covered on Daily Wire, MSN, like, it's actually picked up by stories, almost like the Las Vegas story a little bit, even more. This is the meme that some people say started it all. More than 60 police cars swarmed the Bayside Marketplace in downtown Miami on Monday night, New Year's Day, to shut down a fight involving a group of teenagers who were also throwing fireworks at each other in the open-air shopping mall. 4 teenagers were arrested in connection with the incidents reported by local WPLG TV. According to suspects' arrest report mentioned by the television station, the juveniles were causing a riot inside the mall and causing panic. Dozens of officers were called around 8:30 p.m. local time to the 2-story mall at 401 Biscayne Boulevard after several people called 911 to report what they thought were gunshots, but were instead later to be found to be fireworks. Police cars occupied the boulevard, temporarily blocked access between 2nd and 4th Street. So a lot of people were talking like, okay, there's all these cop cars. There's 60 cop cars. That seems like an overkill for a bunch of teenagers fighting. Well, people thought there was gunshots. So if you think this is an active shooter situation, you're throwing, as a police department, if you're smart, everything you got at it. You're not going to go down as things going really badly and you only sent 4 or 5 cars. You're going to send everybody.
And
I'm just saying.
Miami.
And it was Miami. And then there was reports that they shut down the airport. Not true. I cannot find any confirmation that they shut down the airport. They had some air restriction things going on at the airport. And there's also reports that, 60,000 people were without power in the area. That's not true from what people have investigated. Cannot find anything on that. So then you have these stories coming out on TikTok, and go ahead and go to the video. You have this video. There should be a video, Article 7 video. That's another picture that's been purported around. I swear to God, the Las Vegas story, this is one of the pictures was floated around then saying there was alien in Las Vegas. Now it's the alien in Miami, but go on. All right, this video here, I think this is it. I have 2 videos, Rob, because there's the videos of all the viral stuff and a guy talking about what he saw and then the debunk. Yes, I'm going to have the debunk to spoil that. But go ahead and play. I think this is right. So everybody's seeing this video here of what they say is like a creature walking in front of the cop cars. You see all the police presence there. And that there's this weird shadow next to it. Oh, yeah, this is the debunk of it. Go to the other video. I want to go to the other video because I want to hear the other thing that started this whole thing. Yeah, play this. So this is the first video that everything was going around. You see the arrow pointing at this strange figure, and people are like, it's an alien. And there's a shadow, weird kind of shadow. Well, I'll show it in the debunk, but go ahead and play the audio from this. Turn the audio. I want people to hear this guy. have audio. Oh, shoot. All right. Well, we don't hear it. It's all right. So this guy tells a whole story online about him and his girl had to get their swerve on and run out of the Foot Locker, and they're hearing gunshots, and there's these black shadows running around, and they're 10 foot tall, and people are, firing gunshots and all this stuff, and they got past the police, but the police were holding people. I'm not going to even say his name because this guy obviously made this video on TikTok to get a bunch of views and recognize. He immediately deletes it hours later after getting enough people to view it. And then day or so later posts another video, and we don't have the audio working, where he goes, I was just trolling. I hate people like this. Dude, don't troll to get views or ticks. That's what this guy did. This whole story has gotten blown out of proportion. So we only got a minute left. My hypothesis, maybe something could have happened there, but not likely from what I'm seeing. The only weird thing I will say is that usually when there's these kind of riots going on with kids firing off fireworks or doing these kind of things in a public place, they always videotape themselves doing it. They literally incriminate themselves always. There's none of that that's come out. So I find that a bit odd, I will say. I'll admit that. But this video of the creature that's a manipulated video. They literally took the video, reversed it. There's a clear video. You can see it's 3 people walking. It's 3 people walking. It's nothing. There's no alien. It's just somebody literally manipulated and reversed it. And I said this to Paul and Jamie before the show. I said, is this some kind of psyop by our government to see how we react to these stories online? And they didn't. All they had to do was put out a meme and let the internet eat itself. You know what I'm saying? All they had to do was just put out a little meme or something, and maybe even one little Reddit post, and then boom, it just spreads on the internet because of jerks like that. Like, I was just trolling. I just want to get my likes in too.
And that's why you don't get your stuff from TikTok.
Yeah, a lot of people compared this whole incident now to the Las Vegas incident, which I think is still unclear what happened there. And really odd, the response of Homeland Security putting cameras in the backyard, and the Peruvian one we covered, which I am extremely interested in. Tim Alabrino, go check it out. Redacted does an interview with him on their YouTube channel. Talks about he went down to Peru and talked. I need to get this guy on the show. He went down to Peru and talked to the villagers and everything that's going on, and it's crazy. I don't know if it's some black op project by our government using alien technology. I don't know. It's crazy. Redacted Tim Albrino interview. Check it out there. Our guest tonight, Paul Anthony Wallis. We're going to talk about his new book, The Eden Conspiracy, when we come back from the short commercial break. And then later in the show, we're going to open up the phone lines. You can call in and ask questions of our guest, Paul Anthony Wallis, tonight when we come back after the short commercial break.
Join us every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time for Weird Wednesday, the live stream, with your hosts Jamie, the Living Dead Girl, and Rob, the Phantom, where we'll talk about all things paranormal, including zodiac, astrology, tarot card and oracle card readings, live ghost boxing and spirit communication, where we'll do Voices from Beyond, the Cold Case Files. So we hope you join us live on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Of the second kind, physical evidence of a UFO. Close encounters of the third kind, contact. From Steven Spielberg, the director of Jaws, comes one of the most ambitious and unusual films ever made. And what you will see has never been seen before. It's a cosmic mystery crossing what many scientists believe will be the next threshold of human experience. It is called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It begins in an Indiana town and leads to one inescapable conclusion. We are not alone. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Certificate A. Now showing at the Odeon, Leicester Square.
The international chart-topping Haunted Horror of Haverfordwest has been described as terrifyingly real, a must-read, shocking and chilling brilliance, genuinely worrying, utterly frightening. Don't read before bed. Described as one of the spookiest writers out there, best-selling author G.L. Davies presents Haunted Horror of Haverfordwest. The true paranormal account that is shocking the world. Dare you enter? Dare you read? Haunted Horror of Haverfordwest is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, and wherever books are sold. Pray you never have to live there.
This is the sound of a space clock aboard a U.S. satellite 180 miles above the Earth. No one winds up this timepiece. It's powered by a tiny battery, a battery that delivers power for years without replacement. Now the same type of battery, the Duracell battery, can bring new reliability and long life to your battery-operated equipment. Radios, cameras, toys, all run far longer. Duracell batteries, the long-distance power cells, outlast any ordinary battery. The same type of battery that keeps space clocks running for years can bring long life to anything powered by batteries. Dura, as in durable. Cell, as in power cell. The Duracell battery, made by Mallory.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Switch to DCS ranging.
240, nominal to profile.
We're in the pipe, 5 by 5.
Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guest is Paul Anthony Wallis. Paul is an international best-selling author whose books probe the world of ancestral narratives for their insight into the human origins and human potential. As a senior churchman, Paul served for 33 years as a church doctor, a theological educator, and an archdeacon in the Anglican Church in Australia. Paul's best-selling Eden series, endorsed by George Noory and Erich von Daniken, has made him go to the guy in the field for paleocontact. He's definitely my guy in the field for paleocontact, so I enjoy having him on the show. He's one of my favorite guests. I'm reading his new book, The Eden Conspiracy, Ancient Memories of E.T. Contact and the Bible Before God. The big questions are, this is a question Moses had for Yahweh is, what's your name? Who are you? Who am I supposed to go back and tell the people you are? It's a lot there. and the repasting of Yahweh back through the stories before Moses and all that is an interesting story, and I'd highly recommend this book by Paul. And definitely check out Fifth Kind TV is his YouTube channel. He has amazing podcasts on there with him and translator Mario Bellino, if I got that right. Amazing podcast you want to check out. We will open the phone lines later in the show, but let's go ahead and get to our guest. Welcome back to the show, Paul. It is honestly really an honor to have you back on.
Oh, good day, Jason. It's great to be with you guys again.
Now, like I said, I'm reading about 100 pages into the book. You said I'm just getting to the meaty part. I don't want to give the book away either, so sometimes it's good that I don't. So don't give it away either. But it does seem like the premise of this is kind of how Yahweh got his way in the Bible and the retelling of the Bible, like in the early, 6th century BC, when they decided to basically repaste him in onto everything. My question's always been, reading the Bible, is who the heck is Yahweh? As I said, Moses is like, who are you?
Yes, that is the $64,000 question. Mm-hmm. And when he shows up and introduces himself to Moses, we have to ask, why doesn't Moses know who he is? Why does he have to ask, who are you? And then when some kind of a name is given, how come it's a word that doesn't mean anything? It doesn't carry any etymology in the Hebrew language. It's just a sequence of sounds. What's that all about? And as you mentioned earlier, how come that name was cropped up in texts prior to Moses? And so in the Eden Conspiracy, I probe into that. I ask the question, what was the Bible before the 8th to 6th century BCE, when it was cut and pasted into its current form, rewritten as a single narrative from start to finish? What was it before? And what were those stories about before the name of Yahweh got pasted over the earlier ones? What was the agenda of the writers if stories that we've interpreted as God's stories were actually stories about something else? And I've glanced at that subject in previous books in the Eden series. Here I really go to the heart of it. I show the history of the words used, and then I show that the Bible itself describes the change of narrative from the narrative of paleocontact to a narrative of monotheism. And I show that the Bible tells us when this change was made, who made it, and why.
It seems like that rewrite has been ongoing, with the rewrites of, like, in the 6th century, with the priestlyhood kind of changing things up and trying to repaste Yahweh in, and then when the Christian church comes in, and then they try to change things as well from the early Christian church. So it's within both religions of Judaism and Christianity. It's the early premises of what created these religions have been completely altered. We are at a completely different idea of what originally was for both.
That's true. That's the case with Judaism and the case with Christianity. And so many people reading the Bible haven't realized that books like Jeremiah and 1 and 2 Kings have guaranteed that the careful reader will never forget that Judaism used to be about paleocontact. We'll know that that narrative was changed for Judaism. But Christianity, as you say, that's changed as well, because when you go back to primitive Christianity, it was a kaleidoscope of texts, beliefs, experiences, and there was a process of orthodoxization for Christianity as well, which coincided with it being hijacked by the Roman Empire. And by the time you get into the 300s, you have an emperor, Theodosius, settling theological debates and illegalizing non-orthodox views, and with such force that people realized they had to bury texts that hadn't made it into the canon, bury them like in the deserts. Yeah. Exactly, so that they wouldn't be destroyed. So that tells you how fierce the narrative control was at that point. And
it always has been, though. That's what I'm pointing out. The narrative control is never stopped.
It's always been there. I mean, any government wants to control the narrative. And what I show in the Eden Conspiracy is how Judaism evolved into a religion that had one king, one high priest, one temple, one narrative. And then I go beyond that and say, well, what was it before?
We've talked about it endlessly on this show with you before, but let's get into kind of the premise here of, like, I remember, like you said, the first thing that really clued you in early on it was the Elohim and the plural referencing of Elohim. I mean, it sounds plural to me. Sounds like a plural word. For me, that was my clue a long time ago, reading the Bible when I was young, was the Genesis. You know, we created man in our image. You know, that there's clues throughout the King James Bible even to this.
For sure.
But when you get what you got into is what we get into tonight is the Elohim.
For a lot of people, that is the white rabbit that opens up the Bible and reveals a whole other narrative that's sort of hidden in plain sight. The Bible's oldest word that gets translated as God is Elohim, but it is a masculine plural form word, and it takes plural verb forms and attributives most of the time. And so in Escaping from Eden, I show what happens when you read the Elohim stories, but use the root meaning of that word. And the root meaning is the powerful ones. And when you do that, the stories make a lot better sense. Suddenly you realize why the Elohim are disagreeing with each other, in conflict with one another, going to war against one another. So that's not the sort of double-minded thought life of an individual. That is a community of beings at war, a community of beings in conflict. And then in the Eden Conspiracy, I go into who these Elohim are. It starts with that word, and then you realize there are other words that don't mean God either. So we've got El Shaddai, which is conventionally replaced by the expression the Almighty. And so that's sewn into our thinking for thousands of years, the idea that there is an almighty God, except the Almighty is an invented translation. And you can go to the most authoritative lexicons of the Hebrew language, Brown Drivers Briggs, and they'll tell you openly this is an invented translation. The real meaning is uncertain. The New Jerusalem Bible says this translation is probably inaccurate. And then you go further into their notes and they come a little bit cleaner, and they say El Shaddai either means the powerful one of the mountains or the powerful one of the plains. It might mean the powerful one, the destroyer. And that's the meaning I argue for in the Eden Conspiracy. Then you've got the character El Elyon. And what's interesting about El Elyon is that name means the powerful one higher than the other powerful ones. So it means
there's other powerful ones
among the community. So you've got a community of powerful ones. Here's the chief. And one of the things that El Elyon does, and it's reported in Psalm 82 and Deuteronomy 32, is that he carves up the lands, carves up the territories, and apportions each land to an Elohim. So that tells us straight away there's been some kind of an invasion. There's been some kind of takeover, and now these lands are being parceled out to the Elohim. And one of the Elohim who gets an entitlement from El Elyon is the being Yahweh. So that tells you straight away Yahweh is not the Almighty God. Yahweh is not the ultimate God. He's one of a community.
He seems like the God that didn't even get land, right? His people have...
He got a people group without land. And my goodness me, in 2024, we're seeing the problems of what happens.
Right.
You have people who don't have land, who don't have citizenship, who don't have rights. It's a disaster. And so it's a disaster for certain
created
people
one
now. And it was a created disaster in the time of El Elyon. It's an artificial scarcity that guarantees from that moment on you've got conflict and war.
Well, that's what I was telling you before the show that I really got a few months ago into reading 12th Planet by Zachary Stitchin, which is a fictional tale, but his way of filling in the gaps of what the Anunnaki were, the whole tale of their creation of humanity. And in it is nothing but a bunch of warring between these different Anunnaki for power, control over territories. They're no different than humans. They're no different than humans. They're just as
they're
bad.
very, very similar. I think we learnt a lot from our period of colonization. And those stories of battles that Zecharia Sitchin writes about, which he takes from the Mesopotamian cultures, so from the cuneiforms of ancient Sumeria, Babylonia, Arcadia, and Assyria. And those are really the source documents of the warfaring stories of the Bible, the stories of the Elohim. But you can go to Norse story, Greek story, Vedic story from ancient India, and it's the same thing. Advanced beings with advanced tech who are not human, who are governing over different territories and conflicting with one another. So they're not gods. They're not super spiritual beings. They are simply demographics who've arrived from somewhere else, taken over, colonized, very similarly to the way we invade each other's countries today, and they're fighting for hegemony and resources.
You said, one of the translations was God of the Mountain, which I'm a big Tolkien fan. I love the idea of the dragon in the mountain. That's what I think of, and we're going to get into that. But I also want to, when you say in the mountain, when you talk, well, I don't know how well you've ever gotten into the remote viewing programs our United States government had going. And the people like Rob McGonigal that were in that, they did these remote views that would, multiple remote viewers would see certain mountains, I forget their names, the mountains right now, with alien human bases in them. And some would see that these bases have been there or new, like we've helped build new bases, but there's some that have been there thousands and thousands of years. And there's always talk of alien presences around all these different major mountains in the world.
Yes, there is.
And what a way to claim a territory by taking the mountain.
For sure. I go there in my new book, actually. Later this year, The Invasion of Eden is coming out, and I touch on exactly what you said there.
I can't wait for that one.
God of the Mountain story is, well, it's amusing, but it's also horrible in the Bible. And it's a moment where the tribes of Israel are at war with people of Syria. And the people of Syria have just lost. And they're saying, okay, we've clearly made a mistake here. Their powerful one, their Elohim, is the powerful one of the mountains. So if we can draw him into the plains, we can beat him there. Now, what's interesting about that is it shows that the Syrians understood this word El Shaddai in a different way to our Bibles today. They didn't read it as the Almighty. They read it as the powerful one of the mountains. That's what they thought it meant. Except that El Shaddai says, oh, they think that, do they? They think I can't beat them in the plains. I'll show them. And so a few days later, he shows them that he's really the powerful one, the destroyer, and he effects a total massacre of their people. And this is the theme in El Shaddai's stories. I mean, within a couple of pages of meeting El Shaddai, he's already nuked 2 cities.
Right.
His introduction to Abraham is, I'm the powerful one, the destroyer. Walk in front of me and don't put a foot wrong. And what's worrying about that is not only the question of what was poor Abraham experiencing, but where has that put our ideas of God from that day to this? Is that how God talks to people? I'm the powerful one, the destroyer, don't offend me. That's the idea we have sown into our idea of God in Judaism and Christianity from that day to this. And it's one of the things that motivates me in writing on this. We have to disentangle these stories. That isn't a God story. It's a story of colonization. It's a story of abuse by a more powerful species. Let's not call that holy when it's actually an act of violence.
I mean, with Abraham, was it even Yahweh? I mean, they could have pasted Yahweh onto another god.
That's a very good question, Jason, because when Yahweh turns up, he says, I didn't reveal myself to Abraham by that name. I called myself El Shaddai back in the day.
It's like they're explaining.
Well, is that true? Is that true? Or is that the narrator tying these 2 traditions together?
Right. It's like they got all these events they knew happened at like Abraham and everything leading up to Moses. They knew all these events happened with these beings, but then they got to paste Yahweh onto all of it, even though it might have not been Yahweh. It could have been, another being. See, when I was reading the 12th planet, I'm going, which one of these? Is it Anil, Aniki, or Madak? That's Yahweh. You know, like which one of these is the jerk?
People ask me that all the time.
I bet.
And a lot of people in comments on Fifth Kind TV and on the Paul Wallis channel will come in and they'll say, very straight, they'll say, oh, well, Yahweh is Enlil. That's the key here.
Right, I hear that one a lot. I've heard Marduk.
Okay, well, yes, Yahweh is Enlil in Genesis 3, but not elsewhere.
Right,
and you can't
pasting on Mesopotamian stories now.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about Mesopotamian stories, Hebrew stories. They're not exactly the same, and they don't run in parallel all the way along. In Genesis 3, Yahweh plays the role of Enlil, so he's the one who's against human progress. But he isn't Enlil, as we discover in Deuteronomy 32, when it turns out El Elyon is in charge of Project Earth, and Yahweh is a junior, powerful one getting a people group with no land. In the Mesopotamian stories, Enki is in charge of Project Earth. So all of a sudden, you have to break that equation of Yahweh with Enlil, because Enlil is superior to Enki. Enki is superior to where Yahweh would be. So you can't make the same.
Well, that's why I hear Marduk
story to story.
That's why I hear Marduk. Yeah, I get Marduk in there because he had in the Zachary Stitchin idea, he had no territory at one point, and fights. And that would sound like Yahweh. But like you said, Yahweh has been pasted. So we have multiple pasting on. We have first there's the Sumerian Mesopotamia story, and then the Hebrews paste on their stories, and then repaste onto them and make it all Yahweh.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So another example would be there's a parallel story between the Sumerian texts and the biblical text in Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel story.
Right.
So in the biblical account, it's quite clear that the original version of that story is a story of Elohim, because you've got plural verb forms turning up, and let us go down and see what's going on. Let us destroy the city. And that clues you that the name Yahweh has just been pasted into that story as well. So you can't then try and find who Yahweh is in the Sumerian version of the story, because he's not even in the biblical version of the story originally. So you really have to take each story on its own terms. And sometimes you've got to get into the grammar to work out what was this story before. And if you've got plural verbs washing around, it's a big clue that you've got a bunch of visitors, a bunch of colonizers in the story, not an individual God figure called Yahweh.
That's the thing. When I was talking at the beginning is like Moses on the mountain. I think that's one of the most interesting parts is, you point this out, is asking, who are you? Like they're familiar with powerful beings, but he's not familiar with the name of this one, or he's not familiar with who Yahweh is in that instance.
Yeah, so he says that, who should I say sent me?
Right.
And he says, tell them the being sent you. Now, people might not be familiar with that, but if you go to the Septuagint, this is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. This is the version that Jesus and those who wrote for him used. And when they translate that text, it's tell them the being sent you. Well, what? So what? That's even more of a mystery. And then the name Yahweh has no meaning, as I said before. And so there are many Hebrew scholars who say it's a loan word. It's a word from another language. I argue in the Eden Conspiracy that it's not even that. It's actually a sequence of sounds. And in stories around the world, there is a sequence of sounds that repeats. When you get into ancient stories of times when human beings were governed over by non-humans, listen to the names of the beings who are doing the governing. Koka, Kolkis, Akek, Kukulkan, Kukumats, Quetzalcoatl, Kur. They almost all have this k sound in them. And you might say, well, Yahweh doesn't fit into that. Well, not the way we pronounce it today. But if you go to Proto-Northwest Semitic, which is the source language for Hebrew, the H's in Yahweh were voiced like this. So the sound is there. And I wonder, and I'm not the only person saying this is a sequence of sounds. You can go to, I think Emmanuel Tov is one of the authorities at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem who argues this, that it is a sequence of sounds, it's the memory of a sound, and I believe it's the memory of the sound of these beings. Cultures all around the world have put this into their names because I think that's the sound they made as they approached. And Yahweh fits exactly into it. So when now you go back to text in Joshua, where he's saying, don't serve the powerful ones of Egypt, don't serve the powerful ones of your Mesopotamian ancestors. When he refers to the powerful one of Egypt, that's Achech. Don't serve Achech, serve Yahweh. They're almost the same name. And so it's a clue that the Yahweh stories fit into this family of stories of Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl, Kolkis, Akek, Kur, Kuchedra, Ikuchu, all the others. And they are all dragon stories.
Yes.
By dragon
That's my favorite part of this.
I mean,
yes.
Entities that were not human, who governed over our ancestors in the past, and who our ancestors had to learn to overpower. And that's really the story arc of this family of dragon stories all around the world. It's not focused so much on what kind of entity they were. It's focused on the story of social progress. That human beings had to learn that if they acted collectively, they didn't need to be mastered by a species with better tech. And that the moment they reached the point where fear had suffered from the law of diminishing marginal returns and terror wouldn't terrorize them anymore, the moment they could say, what can he do? He can only kill us, is the moment they could act together and say, we're not going to serve you anymore. That's
all dragon stories.
Power over us. That's all like dragon stories from over the last 10,000 years. They've followed that arc.
I mean, think about it. I mean, people get tired of giving up like 43 virgins. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, we run out of virgins.
This is the thing. It's not just the names. It's the behavior of these entities as well. The fact they all want lamb, beef, virgin girls, and gold. It's the same story everywhere.
Yeah.
And then finally, people say, enough of this. You've had enough.
I mean, in the Mesopotamian Sumerian, the Anunnaki, like you mentioned lamb, they like, they love the taste of it. They mention it that they can't get enough of it. And then you see it later in all the in the Bible where he's like, give me 56 cows or whatever, 56 lambs and 43 virgins and gold.
And I spell it out in the Eden Conspiracy. That's not for the priests. That's for Yahweh.
Yeah, but they try to say that. But the funny part is when they try to accuse the other people of like, well, that is for their priests though, because they don't have a on their.
They don't have a dragon. They don't have a real dragon. That's right. That's the story of Bel and the dragon, where the Babylonians' dragon has been killed, but the priests are faking they still have a dragon in their holy of holies, so they can live off all the gold and beef and have service.
Is that where we get the myrrh with the smoke, just to like fake the smoke of the dragon? You think?
They come out with the myrrh. Very good question.
This is wondering because that's right because there's a lot of incense and smoke by priests and stuff in these temples for ages in different religions. Is it them trying to recreate the dragon?
Exactly. But the punchline of Bel and the dragon is they're faking it. They don't really have a dragon. We really do have a dragon, Yahweh, and he really is consuming all the beef and the lamb. And why would Yahweh, if Yahweh were an almighty God, need those resources? Why would he need virgin girls? And why, like all the other dragons around the world, would he have a horror of female menstruation and therefore need virgin girls in particular?
And what happened to the virgin girls?
Yes, what use was made of them exactly? These stories don't make sense until you realize you're reading dragon story. The fact that the tribes of Israel got rid of Yahweh, so they didn't want him anymore, they wanted a human king. That's a nonsense if you think Yahweh is God. But this sacrificial system is a nonsense if you think Yahweh is Almighty God. And the repugnant moral behavior of the Yahweh character doesn't make any sense if you think it's about Almighty God. Put it back in the context of Dragon Story, and you'll realize the writers are trying to teach us we can overcome draconian rule. We can ultimately overcome hidden hands in human politics, because that's where Yahweh goes next. We can overcome the persistence of old powers, and we can build a better human society when we act in solidarity. That's the real message of those old Yahweh stories, which gets obliterated the moment the translators come along and say we're going to turn this into God's story.
But they can't. It's like they do a half-butt job of it. Because they still leave in the clues, the parts. I don't know if that's purposeful or not, but maybe it was, because there's people that were like, "Hey, I don't think you should change this." I don't know.
That's a great question you just asked there, Jason. Is it purposeful? Because when you get to Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah, the narrator wants the people of Israel, the people of Judah, to forget about all these other entities, to forget about Asherah and Chemosh and Dagon, and to only know about Yahweh. That's what the narrator wants. Except the author of Jeremiah has guaranteed we'll never forget these other entities. So you have to wonder what really is going on here. The author wants us to know that on every high hill and under every green tree, from every fortified town to every garrison city, Asherah was commemorated positively. The author wants us to know that in the 8th century BCE, the people of Israel hated the memory of the time when they were governed by Yahweh, and they thought it was awful. That's what the author wants us to know, never mind what the narrator is saying. But it gets confusing for us, because the narrator says, oh, everyone loved Asherah, and then adds, as it were, a sentence. Isn't that awful? Isn't that idolatrous? And once
that part was added on, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Once we read that little addendum, we think, oh dear, I'm supposed to think it's awful and idolatrous as well. And once you can separate the narrator's opinion of what's going on from the author's reportage of what's going on, it is like scales falling from your eyes. And you'll realize he's telling us in the beginning, Judaism was a canon of cultural memory of paleocontact. Some of it awful, such as under Yahweh, and some of it wonderful and nurturing, such as under Asherah. And that is really the big picture of the biblical story once you make that separation of the narrator's opinion from the information that's just been given you.
One point I heard during your interview, you guys were talking about, because I would listen to the Fifth Kind TV, you were talking with, I think it was about the first king, like, because, all right, we want a human to represent us, like you're saying, like this is the overthrow, kind of. But, Yahweh is still involved. And how he underpins, who is it, the first king, Saul?
Saul, that's right.
Yeah. And how he undermines him, basically saying, oh, you defeated the enemy, but you didn't, kill all the women and children, so you failed.
Yeah, you're banished. Scorched earth, so I'm getting rid of you. And at that point, we should think, hold on, just a bit, you can't get rid of him. You've been sacked.
Yeah.
You shouldn't even have been appointing your own successor, let alone getting rid of him and finding another successor. So what's going on here? And we're supposed to notice that this is very odd. And it's an illustration in the persistence of old powers, because they've gotten rid of this non-human king, so they think, replaced him with a human leader, so they think, except he's still defining foreign policy from behind closed doors.
Right.
And it's almost as if that is a template for every revolution and coup from that time to this, because I grew up in England. And for 800 years, the English have been trying to become a democracy. And so we had the Magna Carta to ring fence the king's powers, and then we had revolutions in the 1600s, and we got rid of the office of the king, and we killed the king, and then we had powers given to parliament, then we had democratic reforms extending the franchise to every man and woman. We were a republic for 15 years. We had all these changes, the labor movement, the labor reforms, 2 world wars. And yet after all that, the same 5 families who ran Britain in the 1500s
are still doing it today. Yep.
And the democratically elected prime minister can't go more than a week with having to report on his or her activities to the senior member of the Windsor family. They can't be prime minister until they've got the say-so of the senior member of the Windsor family. Nothing can become law without the say-so of the senior member of the Windsor family. We now know that throughout her reign, the late Queen Elizabeth II blocked 160 pieces of legislation until she got exemptions for her family. And these were laws to do with human rights, workers' rights, animal rights, racial discrimination. In the 1960s, the Labour government brought in a law that made it illegal to deny people employment because they were the wrong colour. And the Queen would not sign that into law until she had an exemption for her families, because she didn't want that anywhere she lived. Thank you very much. So don't tell me that's ceremonial power. All these democratically elected parliamentarians, who I think are only 40% of the parliamentarians in England, they can't even step into Parliament and do their job until they have vowed obedience and fealty to the senior member of the Windsor family. So don't tell me that the old powers have gone away just because for 8 centuries we've been trying to make them go away. Old powers are very persistent. And the Bible warns us about this pattern in the Yahweh story. They sack him, they get rid of him, they replace him with a human being. And yet all through the history of the kings and queens of Israel and Judah, it's still the preferences of Yahweh that are going to define what is right and what is wrong. Curiously, and this is curious, not all the kings are Yahwists. And that's another little bit of a smoking gun to remind us that Judaism was originally something else. You go to the wisest of all kings, Solomon, and he had a temple to Yahweh, but he also had a temple to Asherah. And he also had priesthoods who served Chemosh and who commemorated all these other beings. And the way the narrator deals with this fact is he says Solomon was the wisest of all kings. Unfortunately, he had foreign wives. So, of course, you've got a temple to Solomon.
He commanded all the demons.
So that's how they get around the fact that the wisest of all kings was not a Yahwist monotheist. And again, with this overlay of isn't that awful, or that's probably the wife's fault, all these little comments try to obscure the main story, which is that these great figures knew about paleocontact. They knew about interventions that had taught their ancestors how to farm and become a civilization. This is all sewn into the story of the Bible. And it's only when you slow right down and you look at the information and not just the opinions that you'll realize this is one of the richest sources of information about human history there is.
Right. So I've always been interested in the Bible.
Yeah. And we miss it because it's been given this religious gloss and we think we're reading a book about God.
Yeah, exactly. To me, like the New Testament and the Old Testament are two separate things. They've always been for me. Two different stories. To me, that's just how I've been. I'm not a Christian, but I've always been interested in Jesus Christ and that, that whole story. But I leave it completely separate from the Old Testament. My curiosity has always been, we have the missing years of Jesus. He seems to be this revolutionary guy, but he was Hebrew, right? So he's reading the Torah. He's reading the same stuff you've read. You know what I'm saying, in a sense, and more access, probably stuff we've lost through the ages. Mm-hmm. He's seen probably the translations and the errors. Who's to say Jesus wasn't a paleocontact guy too? And that's one of the reasons he was revolting.
Yes. Well, he certainly wasn't a Yahwist.
Right. That's what I mean.
If he was, Christianity would be Yahwism, which it isn't at all. You get to Acts 15, and the Apostolic Church makes a very clear decision. Christianity isn't built on Yahwism. Yahwist stories, Yahwist law, no, they're not going to have a place in Christianity moving forward. Unfortunately, all those decisions got reversed as the empire redefined Christian orthodoxy. But Jesus distances himself from Yahweh in many ways. And there are some very percussive moments in the Gospels when he talks about the being that his Hebrew ancestors had been serving and worshipping, who Jesus says was a liar and a murderer and the father of all lies.
They wanted to crucify him for a reason. I mean,
and that his father, Theos, the source of the cosmos, was something unknown to them. And he doesn't just say this when he's having a row with the teachers of the law. He says this to his own closest followers as well. He says, my father, Theos, the source of the cosmos, is something unknown to you. I'm talking about something new. And really, there's a discontinuity between the Old Testament and the New Testament, which we've been entrained to ignore.
Well, like that's the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament, is that Jesus is talking about something really spiritual and talking about his real Father, the real God, the source or whatever, not Yahweh. He's talking about, actually getting spiritual, while you people are slaves to ancient aliens.
Yeah. And Jesus never once uses the word Yahweh. Those who wrote for him don't use that word once.
They understood. Yeah.
Not even in the moments when Jesus is supposedly quoting from Hebrew texts in the synagogue. They will not use that word. It's another smoking gun. There's a discontinuity between what Jesus is on about and these old texts, which are about something else.
And again, I just like I said earlier, I think the original messages of Jesus were just as much perturbed and just, changed and pasted on with other people's concepts later, just as much as the Old Testament. But it's theirs. That kind of pasting was like more of a theological, there's no reincarnation. Get rid of that. Get rid of the reincarnation stuff. We don't want that,
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Because it was there in the beginning. Even in the canonical Gospels, there's a hint of it there, because there's a moment when Jesus asks his 12, who do people say I am? And they say, well, a lot of people, and they're talking about devout Jews, a lot of people think you're a reincarnation of one of the prophets. So bingo, that tells you the ideas of reincarnation were part of popular thought in Jesus's own culture. And then you've got church fathers like Origen and Clement of Alexandria saying, yes, we think that might be what happens. They're tentative about it, but they're open about it. And then you get to the 300s and, oh dear me, we'll have to make Origen a heretic because he said that. Clement of Alexandria, let's get rid of some of his books so that people won't get into that stuff. But again, in the beginning, it's there. It was part of the mainstream conversation before everything got narrowed down to this narrow orthodoxy, outside of which there's only heresy and burned books.
But I think that's the beauty, though, of Jesus. If anything, you can read between the lines. He was trying to get people to open up their minds, be spiritual. When people were just going along with their days, sacrificing, lambs at the altar and worshiping something that's probably been long gone at that point. Yes. I'm not saying, it seems like Yahweh somewhere after he concedes power, or he interferes and all that, but somewhere he kind of disappears.
Yeah, that's right. He's doing it from a distance.
Where do you see that? Right. Where do you think happened, or what do you see there? Like the slowly fading of Yahweh from the story.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think you're right. That is the moment, because from that point on, to get communication from Yahweh, we're going to hear it through an intermediary. We'll hear it through a prophet who has some ability to do remote communication. We might hear it through the high priests who have this ritual in the Holy of Holies, which involves inhaling copious fumes of aromatic oils, some of which might include cannabis
tripping balls,
before they can achieve remote communication.
But they might have been. If you get, that's a whole other subject. But you can get into the whole DMT and God helmet and stuff that people, might be talking to something extraterrestrial in another dimension. So they might have been tapping into that, and other cultures have too. Yeah. But other I find it.
Too, yes.
But the other thing I was going to say is the Ark of the Covenant. That seems to be like him handing off. Here's my phone. Call.
Yeah, that's right. But the funny thing is that when you look at the Ark of the Covenant and the Urim and the Thummim, they are presented as communications devices. But is there anything in the Bible telling you how they worked,
right?
Or if the priests knew how to work them? There's nothing. And I think the picture that emerges from those devices is very similar to what we find, for instance, in the carvings of the Jaguar dynasty of the Yucatan Peninsula. They wanted to achieve remote communication with their feathered serpents. Yahweh was a feathered serpent in the Bible. His feathers are described, his flight feathers.
Yes.
and his scaly skin. Well, we've got the same kind of entity in the Yucatan Peninsula. Kukulkan was a feathered serpent, but by the time of the Jaguar dynasty, they've disappeared. And the only way you're going to get communication from them is remote communication, again, through an altered state of consciousness. And in their case, they used a bloodletting ceremony in order to get into that brainwave state where they could begin to achieve contact with these ancient beings. They had physical technology, just like the Urim and the Thummim. They had something that looked like a Bluetooth earpiece.
Yeah.
But they could only make it work through altered states of consciousness. So it's a very parallel thing where for a long time the humans have been impressed with the feathered serpent's technology. They've taken all their orders from them. But now those beings are no longer on the planet's surface. They've gone home. So if you want to show you're ruling on their behalf, you're going to have to achieve some kind of remote communication. That's why we have these stories of Ark of the Covenant, Urim and Thummim, the Bluetooth in the place of the voices in Yaxchilan, in what's now Mexico.
Well, that's why I was always wondered, is it the moment that, after they find the promised land and Moses goes to the desert, I've always wondered, is that the moment Yahweh is like, because he left him the ark, is that the moment Yahweh's like, all right, I'm going to go rule off somewhere else or whatever. I've had it with you people. I don't know. You got your promised land.
I think it's very possible. I think it's very possible. And I don't think we should take at face value all the claims of ancient prophets to be speaking for invisible presences. But clearly we're expected to believe that remote communication is going on and that Yahweh is still interested. But, well, there's space for interpretation there, isn't there?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, if Yahweh was this alien or a dragon alien or something like that, I'm not trying to be facetious here. I mean, I'm serious. I'm if this is this entity, it's communicating with Moses and Abraham, and what it would probably done is communicated through telepathically.
Yes, hence the
it's possibility, right? And so people knew this is the way to communicate with these beings, there or not. I mean, obviously, Yahweh calls to Moses from a distance.
That's right. I think it does connect. So, I mean, I think it's very likely that if you've got communication from an advanced species to human beings, they're going to communicate telepathically. And so then if you've got priests, seers, shamanic individuals washing around, they will say, look, if you want to achieve communication, you need to be as sensitive as you can be. Why don't you smoke what I smoke? Why don't you inhale what I inhale? Then you've got a better chance of hearing that being. So I think what you've just said really ties it together very well.
I mean, it could have just, it was the modus operandi that these going all the way back to the Anunnaki could have used, or whoever these beings were that were doing, fighting over territories or whatever. When they were communicating with humans, if it was telepathic, that would have set us up to be like, yeah, we can communicate them. The other idea is communication across long distances with space. Like in Star Trek, they can, they get space beacons or something to relay message. But in truth, that'd be really hard to make communication happen. But if you can tap into the telepathic realm, there's no time, no space. You can instantly talk to somebody somewhere else through that.
Yes. So we do have a couple of hints within the Bible that this is the approach. One is what I mentioned before about this copious inhalation of oil vapor before you're going to start hearing things. And the other, we get a little glimpse of the training of a prophet whose job is going to be to get remote communication from Yahweh. And it's the prophet Samuel. And what we're told is that he first started getting these communications when he was a boy falling asleep. And so he's in that liminal state when your brain waves go into delta, I think it is. And they're saying, that's the point. Pay attention there, because that's where the communication comes. And so we get a little glimpse of his training when Samuel, as a young boy, first hears voices as he's falling asleep. And his trainer, Eli, says, next time that happens, say, speak, I'm listening, and see what happens.
And then this, like I said, you go back to the Mesopotamian, they had the physical contact with these beings. and it's like almost the Hebrew story is the third in the movie in the trilogy. You know, the aliens have left, yet their presence has always been be known here because of the implications of what they created and did here in the territories and the families they set up, because they set up basically their representatives, human representatives on this planet. Yes. And they're probably still fighting to this day.
Yes, I think so. And I think our ancestors wrote these stories because they want us to understand the world we live in. And they're telling us that we will never have a complete understanding of what's going on in the world until we realize there is a non-human layer to human governance. And that's why things work the way they do.
I was listening to one of the podcasts you did. You mentioned, I think it was 2009, the Catholic Church came out with the colloquium, right? And I thought the same thing. When I heard you say this, I'm like, I had the same thoughts about that. Is they came out, and it was really interesting, with the colloquium and admitting to the existence of alien life out there. And then it kind of just went away. But it's like they almost jumped the gun on what's happening now. Like they were almost like they expected all that's happening now to happen back in 2009 or something.
I think so. They gave the impression that they wanted to get in ahead of another authority disclosing something so that the faithful wouldn't panic. And so they held the colloquium. It was done so publicly, and you had very senior spokespeople like Monsignor Corrado Balducci, who's the Vatican Senior Advisor in Paranormal Ministry, Reverend Dr. Guy Consolmagno, the Senior Astronomer for the Vatican, Father Jose Gabriel Funes, the Director of the Vatican Observatory. And they were all saying, we shouldn't be surprised to have contact with other civilizations. We should be ready to embrace them as a brother or sister alien. There's no theological issue. It just means the Creator's been busier than we thought. We shouldn't be surprised to see them because they're in the Bible, the Old and New Testament. And I thought, oh, gosh, they know something I don't know. What's coming? And I didn't know if it might have been because there were some expeditions to the moon at the time. I think China was about to land something on the moon.
That's a good point, right?
And I wondered if they thought, oh, crumbs, well, what are they going to disclose? Or if it was something else. And I know my friend Michael Salla has a theory that it was actually something else that led the Vatican to believe there was going to be a disclosure. And then there wasn't one. And then it all went quiet. Now, if you go online to find all the interviews that those three spokespeople did back in the day, you're hard pressed to find them now.
Pretty scrubbed.
So I'm glad I jumped on them, and you can find what they said in Escaping from Eden and The Scars of Eden, because now it's very thin pickings. But that's what they did at the time. They were expecting something to happen. I applaud them for doing it.
Yeah.
And I think if they can come forward and say things like that, well, where are all the other churches? Why do all the other Christians around the world still think it's a taboo? Why do so many Christians in America think if you're talking about aliens, you're talking about demons? We need to break the taboo, talk about these things. The idea that people can see, experience, explore, talk about, research, but not if you're a Christian is absolutely ridiculous.
You're a Christian. You still consider yourself a Christian.
Absolutely. So this is why I love to be in the field. I love to be talking about it, writing books about it, because we have to break the taboo. And as soon as we do, I think we'll find there's not a friendship circle or a family circle anywhere in the world that doesn't have a story of the strange and weird and anomalous to suggest that we've got a lot more company than you or I were ever taught about in school.
I think there's, you have doing this now for as long as you have, you get pushback, I'm sure, from people in the theological community.
Yes.
You're a very respectful person, and, you're very honest. You're a very sweet guy. But how frustrating does that get? Like, the people that claim to be theologians that aren't, they're really not looking at the obvious when a lot of people could read the Bible and see it that aren't theologians.
Well, thank you. And you're a sweet guy too, Jason. Back at you. But it's a mix of communication I get. And yes, I do get some very hostile pushback, but it's not from senior theologians. This is what I think is so sad. It's from people in the churches who feel they are defending God when they defend orthodoxy or they defend the translators. And if they only knew what their pastor was taught at seminary, if they only knew what the lecturers at their denominational college believe, they would be shocked, because I don't get pushback from that level
from the people that are actually really the academics.
Academic theologians know the case for what I'm saying, even if they
it's
don't
undeniable.
want to agree. Even if they don't want to agree with all my conclusions, they know the theological case for what I'm saying. And I think that's the scandal here. We have known at an academic level for 150 years that many of our God stories are based on stories of extraterrestrial beings described in the Sumerian text. We've known for 150 years. How can we know that at an academic level for 150 years, and the rank and file of the churches have never heard it and think I'm some kind of loon if I say it? It's an absolute scandal that this information hasn't been shared. But now is the time to be bursting that bubble, and that's why I'm putting the books out.
It really is the time. It really is the time, because like I said during the World Wide Web Weird about what's going on in Miami, is that they're playing, are they playing psyops on people to see how people react? The one question people have always had about this, we got to go to commercial break here though, is how will religion react to the alien presence on Earth? And I know a number of Christian churches out there that will lose their, crap over it because they are enthusiastically calling anything anybody sees paranormal or sees alien as demons and demonic. And if the aliens, like, it was totally beyond the government disclosure, like landing and invading malls or doing things, these people are gonna it's gonna be bad. They're gonna have a really hard time.
Yeah. Well, they probably will, but it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't. We can get into that. We got to go to commercial break. We'll talk more about that, and we'll open up the phone lines for your questions, as long as you're respectful. That's what I'm saying. We're going to have an honest conversation. You can have a different opinion than me or Paul. As long as you're respectful in that conversation, we're good to go. We can talk. If you're not, I will hang up on you. Just so you know. But the phone lines will be open. Just wait till after this commercial break when we come back with our guest, Paul Anthony Wallis, author of the Eden series. His newest book is The Eden Conspiracy, Ancient Memories of E.T. Contact and the Bible Before God, when we come back from the short commercial break.
Conducting an experiment into the combined effects of sensory deprivation and hallucinatory drugs. The subject of the experiment is himself, and the experiment is out of control. Ken Russell's Altered States, a film that must not be missed, is in the West End now. Altered States, Certificate X.
Do you wish for more paranormal and spiritual content? The Paranormal Chronicles magazine is a free digital magazine crammed with the very best in paranormal and spiritual articles and features. No sign-up, no subscription, just free reading and knowledge for you. Read today at www.paranormalchronicles.com/magazine.
Join us every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time for Weird Wednesday, the live stream, with your hosts Jamie, the Living Dead Girl, and Rob, the Phantom, where we'll talk about all things paranormal, including zodiac, astrology, tarot card and oracle card readings, live ghost boxing and spirit communication, where we'll do voices from beyond the cold case files. So we hope you join us live on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Paranation Magazine is a new paranormal magazine based out of Denver, Colorado. Our goal isn't just to give you the best paranormal content out there, but to promote paranormal unity. We're doing this by giving everyone an opportunity to tell their stories and to share their experiences. For more information, follow us on Facebook at Paranation Magazine and soon, paranationmag.com.
I've Never Met a Dead Person I Didn't Like is the extraordinary travels of a young, alone, and broke psychic in the highly anticipated new book from internationally renowned psychic, medium, medical intuitive, and best-selling author Sherry Dillard. Critics have described I've Never Met a Dead Person I Didn't Like as an engrossing memoir, an empowering story of how a broken girl came to accept her psychic gift, a refreshing and fun read. I've Never Met a Dead Person I Didn't Like is available through Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold.
Wrote Spirits of the Dead with a pen dipped in warm blood. You will see the ultimate in terror with this important all-star cast. Brigitte Bardot, Alain Delon, Jane Fonda, Terence Stamp, and Peter Fonda in Edgar Allan Poe's Spirits of the Dead. Only Poe's demented genius could bring to the screen such horror and evil. Spirits of the Dead stars Brigitte Bardot, Alain Delon, Jane Fonda, Terence Stamp, and Peter Fonda. Directed by three masters of the cinema, Federico Fellini, Louis Malle, and Roger Vadim. Spirits of the Dead is an adventure in terror beyond your wildest nightmares. Spirits of the Dead in color is rated R.
But you could accept the fact that this city is headed for a disaster of biblical proportion.
What do you mean, biblical?
What he means is Old Testament, Mr. Mayor. Real wrath of God type stuff.
Exactly.
Fire and brimstone coming down from the skies. Rivers and seas boiling.
40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes.
The dead rising from the grave. Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria.
You're listening to Paranormal Soup, bringing you the weird every Sunday night. Call into the show and join the discussion. The call-in lines are 219-230-4444 or 260-225-9419 or by Skype caller ID Jblandoo or Jblandparanormalsoup. And now to your host, Jason Bland.
Tonight's guest is Paul Anthony Wallis. We're talking about his newest book, The Eden Conspiracy, Ancient Memories of E.T. Contact and the Bible Before God. We are not trying to knock anybody's religion, just so you know. You have your beliefs, that's fine. You can call in and discuss. But for me, I've been somebody that's been looking into the Old Testament, to New Testament, to other religions, and have had an interest in Sumerian, to all these different alien contact is what I think they are. That's my opinion. And I'm no expert or scholar, but I think there's a lot of scholars out there that are seeing this. I think it's been people that help write the Bible try to give us hints and clues, and to let us know that there's a lot bigger story to the glance over we get. A lot of it's retelling of Mesopotamian and not Anunnaki stories. This is what interests me, because I believe aliens have been here for a long time. And maybe the Anunnaki left, but there's other aliens here. Now, I don't know about 10-foot tall ones down in Miami shopping mall. But I think a presence is being made known here, as we see in the UFO sightings, the alien abductions, that there is a presence here. And what happens one day when that presence is known? What will happen to people? What will happen to society? Is that why the secret's been kept? I think people like Paul and the work they're doing could help with people understanding where the religion came from and what aliens have to do with it. With a lot of discussion tonight. Phone lines are now open. Call in the show, join the discussion tonight, but let's go ahead and get back to our guest. Thank you for staying with us, Paul. So where were we? We were talking about how the world would react to this and how religions would react. You know, some people said the reason Jimmy Carter cried when he found out about whatever the truth was about aliens is because of the religious implications of it, because he's a deeply Christian man. And it makes you wonder how many world leaders have found out information that couldn't handle it or didn't want to look at it or hid it because it questioned all of their religious beliefs.
I personally don't think that is why Jimmy Carter wept. Jimmy Carter has a very deep and intelligent faith. I think there are other things that would have upset him about what he was read into at that time. I don't want to get too far into this because this is really The Invasion of Eden, my next book. But I think that some of the decisions that may have been taken in the 1940s and 50s had some very dark aspects to them in terms of how we engage with the company that we're in and who's in charge of that. Because in 2023, it's become very obvious, it's not the president who's in charge, it's not the Congress who's in charge, the Pentagon in toto isn't in charge. Who are the people calling the shots as to how we manage
BlackRock?
And I think
United Nations.
Exactly, yes. Admiral Wilson described them as corporate types. Mm-hmm. And I think probably it was some of the information to do with that. Who's representing us? What decisions are they making? On whose behalf are they making those decisions? In whose interests? I think there's a lot to weep over once you get into that. And I strongly suspect it was that was so upsetting. I think if you connect the dots between President Carter's moment and the parting messages of Presidents Woodrow Wilson,
Eisenhower,
and President Eisenhower, I think that gives you a clue as to what might be really upsetting about what's going on. But it's why I'm excited about things becoming more open in the last 12 months. We've had more disclosure in the last 12 months than I've seen in my lifetime. And I think the light of scrutiny can only help us unravel what's going on in the present. And one of the reasons why I love to talk about ancestral wisdom is I think it can keep our feet on the ground when tackling the present. I think if all we did was watch the news and listen to our members of Congress grill witnesses or try and get information out of the program, the Pentagon, we would think it's all about conflict and war and existential threats and military threats and national security. And no, that is not what it's all about. There may be an aspect where we have to think about those things, but if we listen to ancestral story, contact with cosmic neighbors, it's not all about war and existential threats. We need to get our head around what it means to live intelligently in a populated universe. And again, it's one of my strong motivators in writing.
That's the thing. I mean, remember Reagan's classic speech, like, if there was an alien threat, how quickly would we all be, how quickly we would all come together if we all had a common threat that was existential to the human race, That's the question.
Yes. It was an interesting moment.
That's what the military industrial complex wants to put forth. That's what I'm saying.
Of course. I mean, obviously, if you've got this existential threat hanging over you, then you've got limitless black budgets that you can have access to as a corporation in the world of aerospace and warfare. So at the time when Ronald Reagan made that statement, he had his own initiative, which was the SDI, the Star Wars Initiative.
Yeah.
When he started making speeches about this, his language was very enigmatic, and people were saying, alien threat? What? Are these weapons to protect us from other countries or from an attack from outer space?
Right.
And when he made the speech at the UN, there was this very pregnant pause when he talks about the alien threat. Everyone's left thinking, what? Where's he going with this? And then he says, and what could be more alien than the threat of war? And sort of lets people off the hook. Except, meanwhile, I'm living in Amersham in South Buckinghamshire in England, just down the road from the top secret facility that was working on Ronald Reagan's SDI on a project that within a matter of months, a whole number, 25 of the senior scientists working on it, all committed suicide.
I like the quotes there. Yes.
So the quotes are there because even the leader of the trades union stepped forward and spoke to the press and said it is statistically impossible that these are all suicides. The families don't believe it, and the coroners are returning open verdicts. Something's going on here. Something's being covered up. And Margaret Thatcher, who was Prime Minister at the time, had to step forward and say, we don't need any kind of a royal commission into this.
Yeah. Nothing to see here. Move along.
No inquiry needed. The minister's already told you it's just a coincidence. Well, having lived through that period, I am now open wide and in wonder at what's happening in 2023, because we are well and truly beyond the period where people are suicided at that number to keep a lid on things. And we said before we came on the air, there are very significant people in the military intelligence community, including Thomas Monheim, the Inspector General of the intelligence community, who are in a forward-leaning posture with regard to more disclosure, the public being told more, even Congress being told more.
The clue to that's David Gersh. Just recently, the way he said, I am now been approved to tell you I have had some firsthand knowledge. Beforehand, he couldn't tell us that. So he's obviously getting orders from somewhere that he can do that. That's not against David Gersh. I'm not trying to attack him. Yeah.
It's not orders, it's clearance.
Clearance.
So what is significant about that is you've got the Inspector General of the intelligence community and DOPSA, who have cleared David Grush to make all the statements he has. He's still bound by official secrets laws. He's only saying what he's allowed to say. And so that's a phenomenal change of policy from the period when we were suiciding scientists because they knew too much about the technology they were reverse engineering or whatever it was they were doing. So something very significant has happened. How much disclosure is going to result, I don't know, but we've already had 3 of the scientists working on the program. Bear in mind, before 2019, there was no public acknowledgement the program even existed.
Right.
2019 was the first time in 70 years the Pentagon says we've got UFO materials which we are working to reverse engineer. And now we've got Eric Davis, Gary Nolan, Jacques Vallée, who are all able to say, yes, we are among the group doing the reverse engineering. We're working on exotic materials. We're working on materials that seem to have an impact on space-time. We're going to try and replicate that texture and build something from it. This is all in the public domain. And of course, you have to ask if that's in the public domain. If that's how far forward we are, what's happened behind closed doors?
I need my Bob Lazar "I told you so" shirt. I gotta have that to wear on the show or one of these episodes because, I mean, I remember Art Bell, doing these interviews with Bob Lazar and talking about if it ever was officially even recognized in any such way, it'd be a snowball effect. I remember him always describing it as, and that's why they can't come out with anything, because if they come out with anything, then it's a snowball effect and it'll open up more doors and questions. And is that what we're seeing now? Somebody opened the door and now and the ball's rolling down the hill, collecting more speed and weight.
We are being invited to connect the dots. I mean, it's thanks to Thomas Monheim, really, that the David Grush complaint escalated to the point where there was a congressional hearing, the House Oversight Subcommittee public hearing on the 26th of July. And if people haven't been following this, just a quick commercial for my forthcoming book, The Invasion of Eden. I go to all the juicy bits of what happened in that hearing and what's happened since, so you can see why it was done, why that was allowed to be said, why he stopped there and didn't go further when he was asked that question. If you're catching up with this story, then beginning of April, Invasion of Eden is going to bring you right up to speed.
I cannot wait for that book.
I think people who've been following the news by now must be open-mouthed at how much has been disclosed, because we've got official acknowledgement of contact possession of craft, possession of an entire craft.
And they said 9 crafts to start. I'm like, Bob Lazar told you so. Come on. Like, it's all right. It's all been there. We've all, like, everybody that, like me, you, and people have been involved in this stuff, we're seeing this stuff, and people, like, the media talk about it. It's like, welcome to the party, pal. We've been here. We've heard this stuff. We knew this stuff. But now it's being officially recognized. It's giving people the opportunity to speak up that never would have.
Definitely.
We're getting deathbed confession stuff now. You know what I'm saying? There's stuff coming out more. It's a snowball effect that Art Bell described.
But I think we, the public, need to let our journalists and media outlets know that we are interested. That this stuff that is now in the public domain is stuff we want to consume. We want to know about this, because if journalists will pursue this, if they will go and sit down at the offices of Boeing and Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and Skunk Works and say, so what have we found out? I mean, they might not say anything. I'm sure it's very limited what they're allowed to say. But as a journalist, wouldn't you ask the question? Wouldn't you film the reaction? You know, there is so many ways we can follow up on this. Keep this in the mainstream media. Keep this in public conversation, because this is a time to keep the pressure up. We want scrutiny. We want accountability. I mean, how much of the $9 trillion unaccounted for dollars in the US budget has gone into this? This is public money. Don't we have an entitlement to know what that's been spent on? What are we getting?
You can't handle the truth.
And it's not just a matter of this was our money in some petty kind of way. This money is going into advancing the human story, because if the program succeeds and suddenly we become a truly spacefaring civilization, our relationship with our neighbors completely changes. So it's to all our interests that the program should succeed. So it's not a matter of shining light on it so we can shame them for wasting our money. It's we want them to succeed. We don't want to be objects. We don't want to be the observed. You know, we don't want to be data for other civilizations. We want to be in the conversation. And I share Ed Mitchell's optimism, Ed Mitchell, the Apollo astronaut, that when we become a part of that community, when we have an intelligent place on the table of spacefaring civilizations, it takes the human story to the next level. We have lived too long as slaves to corporations, exploiting the energy market, for instance. All that will change.
That's a big part of it.
If we've got 0-point energy, if we've got manipulation of gravity,
get into that.
The whole economic structure of our world changes in what I would say is a very positive way, even if it's only about preventing 8,000 British people freezing to death on an annual basis because they can't afford the energy to heat their homes. I mean, that's ridiculous if we've got access to free energy. But in fact, the whole world's economic structure would change if we were shown this technology we've got access to, and our relationship with our neighbors with even better tech would change once we are spacefarers in the same way that they are. So the success of the program is something we should all be supporting and applauding, and it's for that reason we need the light of scrutiny on it.
Well, you know, if we had any legitimate journalists and media, I mean, a good story, you want to get into 0-point energy, you want to talk about suicides, we can put in quotations, as all the people related to 0-point energy research who have suicided or died by some mysterious circumstances. The list is very long.
Yes, and probably gravity manipulation as well.
Anti-gravity and 0-point energy, pretty much. That whole realm there of people involved who have been inventors, people who've, you know, even reported on it that have died mysteriously. That's a whole other show.
So we've had enough of that. And
that's the thing. When it's under the shadows by governments, and really, when I say governments, I honestly don't think it's governments, by corporations and powerful families and banks. That's who I think is really control this. This is why Congress can't just get all the information because they went to the private sector. I think that's what Eisenhower is really trying to warn us of.
Right. I absolutely agree, because essentially when the Pentagon privatized the program, it really set up an economic incentive that runs against disclosure. Because if the program's job is to make advances, if it suddenly does make an advance and suddenly we've got the technology, well, it's in their interests, if they've got limitless black budgets from year to year, to test that as long as possible, and reveal it as slowly as possible. So
Or not at all.
Or not at all. That private, well, you've got to have a carrot. You've got to say, oh, we're getting closer. But I think the incentive is running the wrong way once you privatize it. And it's very interesting. You go back to the statement made by Eisenhower in his farewell speech. I mean, he doesn't name the families,
Wish
but
he
he
would have.
all but names the corporations. He's talking about the major aerospace corporations that equip us when we go to war, or equip other countries when they go to war. Well, we know who those corporations are. We know who the people are who are running that. So it really was an incredibly pointed statement. And his concern was not that those corporations should exist or make profits. His concern was that their influence would change our culture.
Yep.
And I think today, when we are looking to the skies and saying how much alien tech is up there, we might do better to look at our culture and say, where are we going? Where are we shifting? Eisenhower warned us about a way of life being undermined by certain corporations having power that exceeds the power of elected governments. Should that be where we're looking for undue ET influence? And I think we should be asking questions about what are the alliances we've made? What were the decisions made in the 1940s concerning how we sit in this super company? Are we talking to the right people?
Right,
Have
that's
we
what I'm saying.
engaged the best help? Should we be extending a hand towards other demographics, saying, can we talk because we want the human story to go in this direction? And I think we've got a better chance of that happening when there is more light being shone on all those conversations and all those processes. As long as it's in the dark behind closed doors, we're totally disempowered and more likely to be exploited.
I mean, Eisenhower presidency, you know, in his farewell speech, there's so much about his presidency in this story. I mean, supposed contact that Eisenhower had, a meeting. You know, I'm having Paul Blake Smith on next Sunday, and he's wrote a whole book on it. You know, to the fact of how he shaped the intelligence community. I think part of that speech was also to warn us about how our intelligence community is going to could get out of hand, you know, and because of corporations. I mean,
he
you know,
did.
basically.
He made more than one speech in which he warned the American people almost to expect smokescreen governance.
Yeah.
And not to take anything for granted that they heard from official sources. This too is in The Invasion of Eden, coming soon.
Sorry, I'm ahead of your book here.
I had to go there to bring things up to the present day, and I've got an endorsement on the cover by Laura Eisenhower, just to clue the reader that yes, we're going there, we're going into that territory, we're going into that story, and asking how that relates to what our ancestors had to tell us.
I'd love to interview her to talk about her experiences and, you know, with her family and that. Because, like I said, I think Eisenhower, the two presidencies that really shape this conversation now, so many years later, are right next to each other, is Eisenhower to Kennedy.
Don't leave out Truman.
No, Truman's true. Yeah, I mean, Truman, the formation of the CIA, Roswell, yes, I get that. But I'm not trying to judge Truman, but I feel like Truman was a yes man, while Eisenhower and Kennedy were people seeing what was happening and trying to get some semi-control over it or change it unsuccessfully.
Oh, I think that's very insightful. I mean, any president, of course, is going to be advised. And any president is going to be strongly advised by military and military intelligence. So they're all in that boat. But I'm with you in how you describe what the different presidents were actually bringing to the table and bringing to the party. And I hope that in The Invasion of Eden, I show that Eisenhower actually brought something very, very positive to the table once he was read into this conversation.
I mean, how could he not? I mean, he worked in the community. He knew how the systems worked. He knew about the corporations and as a general and being involved. There's no way he knew how the game played, unlike a president like Truman, was more of a politician. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
like I said, it's not a, I'm not trying to insult Truman or his memory, but I'm just saying that's just the positions they were in. He had a very much more fundamental understanding. I think he passed, I think Kennedy took note somewhat of what Eisenhower said,
I agree.
And his whole 3 years or 3.5 years was just a fight with the intelligence community. And I think that's where we see we lost.
I agree. Yes, I think you're absolutely on the money there, Jason.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people think, Kennedy was going to tell, about aliens and stuff. None of that even matters. What was going on was the war machine, the intelligence community, and a fight for control. Who's really in charge here? The executive branch or the intelligence community that's supposed to be working for the executive branch?
Yeah.
But really, they're working for the corporations.
Exactly. And even Kennedy, before he went, had made speeches about the unwarranted power of secret societies. So he's sounding the same note as Woodrow Wilson and Eisenhower.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's major changes that happened during those presidencies that set us on this path. Like I said, they're all big pieces of the history that put us here now with the conversations we're having about disclosure, with the war in Ukraine, with what's happening in Palestine and Jerusalem. All these things are all interconnected. It's all goes right back to the corporations, Raytheon, Boeing, then the banks, BlackRock. I mean, think about all the land and farming land they bought up in Ukraine now because they're so in debt. I mean, I'm not trying to get political. I'm trying to get what is going on. It's not just about aliens or and all this stuff that the disclosure. There's a whole industry and power dynamic that if there's alien technology and they it's not in our government or military, it's in these people's hands. And these people are in a fight for control right now to keep their control.
Exactly. And I think that's the answer to anyone who says, why should I be interested in ETs?
Exactly.
Well, are you interested in the world you live in? Why it's working the way it is? Why it's not working in the way it isn't working? And from our earliest ancestors right up into the present, you have voices saying, you cannot understand why things work the way they do until you factor in the non-human layer to the matrix of decisions that governs Project Earth. I mean, this is being written about in the 1600s by Robert Kirk in Scotland. It was being written about by our ancestors who put the Old Testament together, people who are writing at the beginning of Christianity, indigenous cultures all around the world. Go to indigenous Australia, First Nations, Canadians, Native Americans, they all have these stories. The ancient Greeks, Africans, all have these stories of the non-human layer impacting our political life. So what I've found is once you start looking into paleocontact, you realize it does connect with everything. It's not just about the past, it's about the present. It's not just
it's
about
an ongoing
YouTube.
story.
It's about our political structures and what's happening in the world today. And I think for our geopolitics to change, we have to understand all the layers that influence public decision around the world. So we have to shine a light on these things. So again, I really think we've got to support our journalists who have been under siege for the last few years and tell our media outlets we are interested in this so that they will pursue these questions and really begin shining a light onto these things. What's the point of living in a democracy if we're not going to have free inquiry, free speech on matters that affect all of our lives?
Yeah, they were not. Well, I mean, I was telling you about the show, or before. I think I was telling you this before the show. I don't think we've talked about it on the show, but the whole Peruvian thing I was telling you about with the alien and the encounters in these villages. Okay, where they're talking about 7 to 8 foot, 10 foot tall beings in black armor on these hover pads, But there's actually descriptions of people talking to, like, that these were actually humans in these things. That this is some like black budget project going on. There's only one journalist that's gone down there and talked to the people. Tim Albrino, redacted YouTube channel. You can hear his interview on there. I'm like, this is a major story. If any journalist out there is really, like Tim is, interested in figuring out what's going on in these black budgets, this might be a clue. Because if you hear what these villagers are talking about, yeah, sometimes it sounds like aliens, but there's other times this sounds like us testing out alien technology on villagers. Big time. Get into it. Listen to the redacted interview of Tim Albrino. It came out this week. I'll send you a link to it, Paul. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what he's been seeing down there, because I mean, there are ancient cultures that, you know, they go back a long time. I think they've had paleocontact in Peru. There's a lot of history there, obviously, when you want to get an ancient aliens in Peru. But you know what's happening there now is like, is this aliens or is this black project stuff going on? Either way, there are nefarious actors. I think they have this technology. They're using it for whatever purposes. Some people say human trafficking. You know, there's soldiers have witnessed in the jungles of a big UFO ship. I can't think of the guy's name. You know, and well-equipped soldiers putting people onto this ship, like unconscious people, like human trafficking. I don't know if that's true, but what if they have this technology? They're not releasing it to the public. You know. And if we're negotiating or talking or making alliances with entities, aliens, we have no say in this as a people of the world. All these nefarious things are going on. We have no say or knowledge of what's going on, what kind of future they're setting up for us here. If we're going to eventually venture out in the stars and be interacting with them, you know, some people wonder if we're quarantined here. Well, no wonder we might be, because we're not even in control. We're not, you know, I'm not calling for a one world government. Hell no. But I'm saying we can't even get our own government in check that are doing things behind the scenes that might not be very, very in our much best interest.
Well, that's right. And the narrative of human abductions and mass human abductions is probably the most widely prevalent theme in our ancient stories of paleocontact.
Right.
Haymashed, who was the Chief of Space Security for Israel for 28 years, Brigadier General Haymashed, talked about, this was Christmas 2020 when he came forward and made this statement. Bearing in mind it's his job to know if we're in contact and if there's any kind of threat. He said, we've been in contact at a covert government level for more than 7 decades, so that takes us back to President Truman, and that we have been collaborating in our visitors' research in and around planet Earth. Well, when he said the word research, I immediately went to the question of abductions.
Right. What are you researching?
Okay, what research is this? How are we involved? What have we agreed to? And I wonder if I were told that, then like President Carter, I might find myself in tears at what's been agreed to. I mean, in Australia, we are not allowed to know the terms of the trade deals that have been made with certain foreign nations. Why is that, I hear you ask?
Right.
Well, it can only be because the terms of those deals would scandalize Australians if they knew what they were. And so coming back to this collaboration and agreement to support research, presumably that's kept secret for the same reason that we'd actually be quite horrified at what we've agreed to.
If you're not getting told what the trade deal is, it's not because it's good. Obviously, they're not telling you because you're getting the crap end of the stick.
There's not going to be a vote winner. So it does concern me. And I mean, what you describe in Peru could very well be part of that kind of a scenario where some of the research is stuff we would be horrified to discover. But again, scrutiny, accountability, only that can push us forward out of these darker places to a better relationship, frankly, with our visitors and governments who then have to support our interests. Thank you very much.
See, why I think your work is so important, Erich von Daniken's work and others in the paleocontact, is one of the problems I think with disclosure. If they really wanted to tell us everything, I don't know if they could, because people can't even grasp the story. There's so many, it's so I mean, when you start talking about like 72 different alien species, or interdimensional entities, and all the different craziness you get when you go down this rabbit hole, how do you explain that to people? Especially when you get into like who it is that we're seeing in our skies.
Well, my take is this: if 3,000 years ago, indigenous elders thought the members of their village could handle this information, why on earth can't we? I actually think we can. And recent polling in the States suggests that if you told the public we're in contact and have been for decades, 2/3 of the population would say, I'd worked that out.
Yeah, that's not it. That's not what I'm saying. Is the story, though. It's
it's convoluted.
Right.
Absolutely. It's a very convoluted story. But I think we're more ready to begin unpacking that than we give people credit for, because if someone's worked out we're in contact, they will be already asking those political questions. They are already not panicking, if you see what I mean. So I think we can get much further than we give the general public.
Well, that's why I wonder,
for.
like, if the Miami thing, that happened, like I said, was this a created internet troll, scenario to test public reaction to it? Because it's you watch how when the news media mainstream starts covering it, that's the tell. Because that's the control.
Yeah, that's true. And I think what happened in 2017 with the Chris Mellon leak was interesting, because you had what I think we have to understand was an authorized leak by Chris Mellon when he leaked the footage of the 2004 Nimitz encounter with the Tic Tac craft. And then there was a 2-year period, I believe, when the unit within the Pentagon was observing public reaction.
Yep.
And then after 2 years of observation, we authenticate that story. So I think there really is a pattern of let a cat out the bag, see what happens. Okay, yes, we can authenticate it. And I think that's the pattern of soft disclosure. I think that will continue.
My question is, why? Why, after all these years, suddenly now, we're going to get this kind of disclosure? My question is, what's coming?
Yes, good question. Because I think, if I go back to Hayam, his explanation is that non-disclosure is a policy decided at 2 levels. First of all, our visitors have chosen not to self-disclose until you and I, the general public, have a fuller understanding of what space is and what spaceships are. That was what Hayam said. So we have.
I think we know what they are, but okay.
We have to be read into this, and then they will self-disclose. So what that's saying is they're holding back as long as our people are holding back. And so our people, our politicians, our technocrats have to decide, okay, we're moving forward on this, and then there will be a disclosure. So I think secrecy has been set not just by, our military intelligence higher-ups. Secrecy has been set at the table of our galactic visitors. So if there's been an acceleration, and if there are more mass sightings than before, I just wonder if the watertightness of that arrangement isn't as watertight as it was.
Right.
If there is more conflict among the powers than there was before. I mean, whether you're listening to Hayam or Ed Mitchell or ancestral elders from thousands of years ago in indigenous narratives, they all talk about the Sky Council. They all talk about this table
federation
of non-human powers, a galactic federation was what Hayam called it. My feeling is that there are more around that table, and that the stability around that table is not what it has been.
Right.
And that's why there's been an acceleration of soft disclosure, because there is the feeling we might not be able to keep a lid on this for very much longer.
Because when you got world peace falling apart. I mean, look, Russia and us are not on the best terms. Russia has made statements. Their prime minister, what was his name? made direct statements about a galactic federation, if I remember right, and alien presence here. I mean, this is the right-hand man of Putin.
That's right. And Putin didn't debunk him or distance himself from Dmitry Medvedev when he said those things.
Thank you, Dmitry Medvedev.
He said every successive prime minister of Russia is given a dossier detailing all the spacefaring civilizations that we're in contact with, and he wouldn't say how many. He said because he didn't want to panic people. But
too late. No,
there's the picture. But I'm not sure that it's warfare on the planet that makes me think things are accelerating, because we've had plenty of that in times past. But it is the amount of disclosure that's happening.
Or technological advancements.
It is the acceleration of mass sightings that makes me think the stability is not what it was. And disclosure may be happening not because of anything the Pentagon decides, but because of things certain of our visitors might suddenly decide.
Or, I mean, look, we got Mexico now going to send up their own probe to the moon. You have Israel, they've tried, and you have India, you got China, you got everybody getting ready to go back to the moon. And I've been fascinated with the moon.
Yes. Well, that's going to change things.
Right. Remember, I think Stanley Kubrick got it right in 2001. Well, it was really Arthur C. Clarke, but the monolith on the moon. Like, it was like, I feel like that's like a psychic prediction in a sense of what could happen on the moon once we all start going back there.
Oh, absolutely. I think physically going to the moon and further exploration of Mars, that's what's really going to accelerate things, because the moment a country, and who knows which it will be, will send back a picture saying, we didn't put that there.
Look at this huge factory on the moon. Like, what is this,
Then the conversation changes. And it's interesting. I've heard people say that if our explorations of Mars reveal human artifacts, that's going to be harder for people to handle intellectually than if we found alien artifacts. And I think there's something to that, because I think the real challenge for people, but it's the exciting thing as well, is suddenly to understand ourselves differently. Suddenly to understand the human race, the human species in a totally different context, and realize that we're not who we thought we were.
That's the thing. I don't think we even have to go to Mars. I mean, I think, like I said, I think the moon is really where it's at.
I agree.
And that we're going to get there sooner than we're going to get to Mars. And the question is, remember Buzz Aldrin, famously, they were trying to use it as, we never went to the moon. This is what, Buzz Aldrin makes these statements of this little girl in an interview about, I think I know why we didn't go back. It's like, he's saying we never went to the moon. No, I honestly, and I think that's a telling part of when Buzz Aldrin's saying this, is that we didn't go back. He doesn't because of aliens, because we didn't go back because we went there too soon.
Yes, I think that's right. And he did. In another interview, he talked about a monolith on one of the moons of Mars.
Yep.
So, I mean, there are things to be found. And it's just a matter of, is someone going to send back a picture so that we can all be read into this?
Yeah. I mean, Carl Sagan said Phobos, I think that was the moon of Mars, that is, has some, just like our own moon, has some very interesting qualities to it that make it almost artificial. And that's the thing. There are, if there was ancient aliens here, they had to have had not just been here on our planet, but other stations, other places in our solar system where they would have left behind traces that never could have been hidden by humans.
Exactly. I mean, there's a wonderful phrase in the Enuma Elish out of ancient Sumeria that talks about people being dispatched from the Shinar Plain in Iraq via a device to their stations in the stars.
Yeah.
And so I think finding artifacts of stations in the stars is going to, I think the Sumerian cuneiforms are going to become bestsellers all over again.
This is what I'm saying, is like, of course, some people out there might be like, this is the rise of the Antichrist and the false religion, but it is like a new religion would be born. I don't want to say a religion, but people will go back to these things. People are going to be interested in Zachary Stitchin and what you're saying and all this. if this ever gets exposed. Like if this really national, worldwide,
I think
people are
that will
going
be
to want to
great.
know.
I think that'll be great. And speaking as a Christian believer, I think if people go back to Jesus and say, "So what was he on about then?" That wouldn't be a bad thing, because we've only rimmed through the lens of the developed orthodoxy and through familiar translations. And I happen to believe he was far more onto all these topics than we've realized. There's a wonderful message that he toured with, for instance, for the first year of his ministry, which is summarized in the Gospel of Matthew. And if you can peel back all the religious entrainment and associations that we've made with the words, get back to the root form of the key words, he makes a statement like this. He says, "Go beyond the mind, because the whole cosmic realm is available to you." Now, that's an invitation to explore. Whole cosmic realm, people,
sounds like he's talking about
powers,
remote viewing.
principles available to you. Well, at hand, it says ready to be engaged with in each other's presence. Now, the way that's been translated, it comes out as a very religious sounding message. The conventional translation is "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand," which sounds like a warning. Get your life cleaned up, because God's about to show up and you wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of him. That's not what it says in the root meanings at all. Go beyond the mind. We need a different mindset. We need to think differently, because the whole cosmic realm is available to you. And I think that's an invitation to go into it, to explore it, to analyze it. It's an invitation to science. It's an invitation to spirituality, to consciousness. I think all these things, and it's incredible. I find when people read my books and wake up to paleocontact, immediately they're asking questions about, well, who are we then? What are we capable of? They're asking questions about consciousness. They're asking questions about the human experience. They're asking questions about individual potential. And that's what really excites me. I think our human potential is phenomenal once we take the lid off it. And I think our old narratives have kept the lid on us very firmly. An old narrative that has actually encouraged believers not to ask questions, not to be too curious, just to pay, pray, and obey. And in the Eden conspiracy, I show that's a very old narrative. It's a narrative of control, not one that leads you to understand the world you live in, or why it works as it does, or what the universe is and what's going on in it.
And they say, do as Jesus would do. Well, Jesus was a rebel. Jesus questioned authority. He challenged authority. He was crucified for challenging authority. He was trying to get people to open up their minds and go beyond, the everyday, I'll just go along with my business and do what the priests tell me to do. He was trying to he was a revolutionist. That's what he was.
Definitely.
He wasn't obeying.
No, that's right. And I think for me, one of the inspiring things about Jesus in the Gospels is as a model of someone who operates without fear, who is able to question narratives, even if that means standing up to, eminent leaders, religious leaders, civic leaders. I think he also models what it means to be, fully conscious and plugged in to what he called his father, the source of the cosmos. I think also, you respond to everything differently if you can get on top of fear. You respond to sickness differently. You respond to taking risks differently. And I think there's a lot in the Gospels that people miss that really predates Jesus as well. Because when I start saying those things, that's all in Plato. In the 5th century BCE, he was talking in exactly the same terms. That if we understand who we are, we're cosmic beings. If we understand that we've got cosmic company, if we understand that there are beings around us wanting to support human progress, then we will all go at life with far greater courage and inquisitiveness than before. And I think that kind of inspiration is what we need in the present. I think we get fed such a diet of limiting beliefs and fear-mongering that it's really very unhealthy. I couldn't believe it. I was in the States just recently in Florida, and I turned the TV on, and every commercial break was really a diet of fear and terror. You know, an advert comes on, you might not be sick yet. Well, by the end of
Well,
the
that's
advert,
because Big Pharma pays for all the ads. That's why.
I'll be experiencing all these symptoms before the advert's over. And it's not just that. All sorts of broadcasts of fear, terrifying, awful things that happen. It's the
Welcome
same
to
here in
America,
Australia.
buddy.
It's the same in Australia. Well, you'll hear the story of this awful thing that's happened. And as a human being, you feel empathy for the people involved. Oh, my goodness, is that kid going to be all right? Tomorrow, the story's gone. There's no resolution. And so we're all carrying this sense of we live in such a dangerous, awful, frightening world where terrifying things happen. And this is so limiting because it leads to us just keeping our heads down, doing our jobs, paying the bills, not asking too many questions, not exploring, not enjoying our lives. And I feel we need to help each other break out of that kind of funk.
Oh,
and I mean, at very practical levels, if you know a couple who are doing it hard because they're so stressed, keeping it together and paying the bills, if you're going to help them so they can have some days of rest, if they can get some date nights, if you can relieve them financially, give them the car that they lack and is making their life a nightmare, all these practical things we can do for each other rehumanize us as givers and as receivers. Is once we're out of the stressed out of our mind survival mode, we can begin to think more clearly.
But
we can begin to reflect.
That's
on
what they don't want. They don't want that.
Explore things, but it doesn't have to be in the power of media, television, politicians as to what our state of mind is. We need to help each other and look after each other so that we can be the wonderful, creative, curious human beings that we are in essence. But we can only do that, I think, if we help each other.
That's a beautiful point. And we need to help our neighbors. We need to be more of a community. Most people don't know their neighbors anymore, or talk to them. And we have social media, which is great things for like us getting to talk to people and have shows and do this stuff. But it also lets people be keyboard warriors and argue over the stupidest things ever. And be outraged at everything, But in a sense, when the economy's getting bad and people are just trying to figure out how to pay the next bill or take care of that car that broke down and you're in fear, you're stressed, you're going to make bad decisions.
Yes.
You're going to be like, save me, big government, save me.
Yeah.
You're going to give your freedom away to be saved.
Yes.
That's a stupid decision. And you'll do it because you're stressed out and you got a crying kid you got to take care of. So no judgment on you for making that decision because I understand it. I understand when you want big government to come in and save you, or the powers that be. When I say big government, I really mean big corporate government.
We see how that turns out when we look at what's going on over with the Palestinians and Hamas right now. They gave up they wanted them to protect them and lead them, and they trusted them to do that, knowing that it might be a little shady, and then all of a sudden didn't work out the way they wanted it to. And
you can see it on both sides.
Oh, for sure.
That can so easily happen here.
The Israeli government has their deep state of military-industrial complex that makes sure that they get those Raytheon and Boeing get their money and keep a perpetual war. They help fund and put Netanyahu helped basically create Hamas to help weaken the PLO, but at the same time to make it a brutal agency so he can say, "Oh, look at all these animals we got to get rid of. They're our animals." Just
People have
because
to watch who they put their faith into and who they follow.
and the people of Palestine are complete prisoners to their not to the Israeli people, but to their own people.
Yes. I think that's another area I think in which we need to be very proactive at a grassroots level. If we've got leaders, politicians, media who are talking about other people in a dehumanizing way, then we need to make a choice that that's not how we talk about people.
Exactly. That's when you should question them.
We are
That's
people
when you should
of
question
compassion. We are people of empathy.
Exactly.
And I think we need to encourage each other, our peers, our children, in every way we know how, to remember that we are loving, compassionate, imaginative, creative, kind, empathic people. And we don't buy into, narratives of demonization and hatred.
Exactly. On either side.
Anything to us.
On either side. I don't support. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because that's what they do in war, and that's what they do in these conflicts, is that one side tries to dehumanize the other and get you to kill them or support them being killed. And it happens in every war with every side.
Yeah. But, it happens within our own nations in other ways as well. I think there's a lot of conversation about, others that's very demeaning and dehumanizing. And I think we need to look out for that. What we really need is a vision of society in which our start point is, I love human beings. I love human beings.
Literally, remember the COVID thing? We're all in this together. What happened to that?
I love my village. I love my town. I love my city. And I think we have to be proactive about being that way, because if we're passive, it will get taken away from us by everything that we ingest when we watch the TV, read our news feed, or pick up a paper.
Yeah,
and those are
resist dehumanizing people. Yeah.
If we can't control everything else, what we can control are these smaller things in our communities and with our people, and helping each other and building this up and doing what we can that way.
Definitely.
I mean, I look at Jesus. He was trying to tell his disciples right away not to dehumanize other people that are different than you by sitting down with, thieves and prostitutes.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Or just people of another religious culture.
Right.
Right. There's the moment when he spoke to the woman at the well, and his disciples are saying, "What are you doing sitting down with a Samaritan, for goodness sake?"
Yeah,
and Jesus
exactly.
Basically, well, what's the problem? Or there's another moment when I think it's incredible, really. A bunch of apostles came back and said, "We found a group of people doing our stuff, but they weren't one of us, so we stopped them. They were doing healing, entity removal, so we stopped them." And Jesus said, "What on earth did you do?
Why would you do that?" Right?
Why would you do that? So I think yes, recognizing each other's humanity. I mean, human beings are complicated. We do bad things. We can be annoying. We can be selfish. But if our start point is, I actually love human beings, and I love it when we're in harmony, and I love it when we pull together, I think that's the best starting place. And if we're not thinking in those kind of terms, then we're ripe for manipulation. I think if we can be more emotionally intelligent, then a xenophobe can't manipulate us. If we're smarter emotionally, a rabble rouser is not going to get any purchase with us. And when they
need more compassion.
Talking ugly, we need to be able to say that's not going to work on us.
Yeah, more of that will change the world than anything is compassion. We got to go to commercial break. And when we come back, the phone lines will be back open after this commercial break, guys. Just hang on with our guest, Paul Anthony Wallis. We're talking about his newest book, The Eden Conspiracy, Ancient Memories of E.T. Contact and Bible Before God. Of course, we're getting a little into your newest book going to be coming out. You said April, Invasion of Eden. I can't help it because there's a lot of stuff when it comes to disclosure and things happening right now that we can't help but not talk about it. And we're going to have you back on to talk about the Invasion of Eden book when that comes out, too. All right, guys, we'll be back. We got a half an hour left when we come back from this short commercial break.
Intercepted the transmission of unknown origin.
Transmission? Out here?
SOS.
Human.
Unknown.
Alien. Certificate X. Exclusive engagement at the Odeon Leicester Square. Now.
Any systematized transmission indicating a possible intelligent origin must be investigated. I don't want to hear all this.
In space, no one can hear you scream.
If you are interested in discovering the truth about the paranormal and want to hear from leading researchers in the field, join Justin Brown on his 3 weekly shows named My Paranormal Soapbox, Necromancer Live Show, and the Supernatural Symposium, live on Facebook, YouTube, and InterfaceDeath.net.
This is an APAC studio presentation.
Hi, I'm Barry, owner-operator of Barry's Barometer Barn. Lately, I bet you've been lying awake at night asking yourself, how many barometers do I really need? Well, at Barry's Barometer Barn, we think you need more than one. Otherwise, we're gonna go out of business. Remember, at Barry's Barometer Barn, we don't know the meaning of high-pressure sales. Come on, folks, buy another barometer. I'm trying to put my kids through college, I've got a family to support, and a secret mistress who isn't cheap.
Visit Barry's Barometer Barn, 000 Storm Drive. Come on, folks, buy a barometer. I'm Barry's older brother, Larry, and every time one of you people walk past the store without coming in, Barry beats me.
This has been a presentation from Tim Morgan's APAC Studio. For more almost professional amateur comic studio content, visit the APAC YouTube channel. Search APAC 2002. That's APAC 2002 on YouTube.
When Alex Gardner is asleep, he has an extraordinary gift. The government wants it, the scientists want it, but to keep it may cost him his life. It might be better if Alex didn't sleep at all, but he cannot resist entering the dreamscape. Can you? See Dreamscape in the West End and all over London now. Certificate 15. It takes an extraordinary adventurer to enter the dreamscape.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Join us every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time for Weird Wednesday, the live stream, with your hosts Jamie, the Living Dead Girl, and Rob, the Phantom, where we'll talk about all things paranormal, including zodiac, astrology, tarot card and oracle card readings, live ghost boxing and spirit communication, where we'll do voices from beyond the cold case files. So we hope you join us live on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Heat 'em up.
Do,
Ray.
Egon.
You're listening to Paranormal Soup, bringing you the weird every Sunday night. Call into the show and join the discussion. The call-in lines are 219-230-4444. or 260-225-9419. Or by Skype caller ID Jblandoo or Jblandparanormalsoup. And now to your host, Jason Bland.
Tonight's guest has been Paul Anthony Wallis. Been talking about his new book I've been reading, The Eden Conspiracy, Ancient Memories of E.T. Contact and the Bible Before God. Phone lines are open. Nobody's called in, but to join this conversation, if you want, feel free to call in. Got about a half an hour left with our guests. We're getting into ancient paleocontact, one of my favorite subjects, one of my favorite guests on this. So let's go ahead and get right back into it. So yeah, I feel like sadly, I got a little bit too far ahead into what your new book, Invasion of Eden. That'll be, you said, coming out in April.
That's right. That's okay. No worries.
I can't help it because it's kind of. I mean, we're like in the midst of it right now.
We are, and the purpose of the Invasion of Eden is really to bring the topic right up to the present day. And yours is the first show actually I've mentioned that title on. So.
Well, thank you. I'm very honored. Very honored. I kind of forced you into it.
But that's fine. And that really was the purpose of the book, because my field is paleocontact, contacting the deep past, evidences in indigenous narratives and ancient texts. But there was no way I could let 2023 go by without saying something and answering the question, how do our ancestors speak into what's happening right now? Because there's been so much change, so much disclosure, people needing to get their heads around it. So I had to write another Eden book. So hence the invasion.
Well, you gotta think these, whatever's been going on in the black projects and secretive government UFO reverse technology stuff going on, they've had to have an interest in paleocontact too. I mean, some of this information we've gotten is that some of the craft that we recovered are archaeological finds, that they're ancient craft.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's a huge overlap. I mean, if you want to get into the politics of war and ask what exactly were we looking for in Iraq, you can't avoid archaeology if you're going to talk about that. Because within days of going into Iraq in 2003, there were units whose job was to oversight archaeological extractions. And after I published Escaping from Eden, I had people contacting me who were veterans of that conflict, asking me what I knew about various kinds of technology, portal technology, Stargate technology. But was that credible? Because they had heard from their peers that their archaeological missions had been involved in something like that. Others came to me and they said, can you tell me everything you know about Gilgamesh? Because peers of mine were involved in that archaeological extraction. So what's interesting here is people had gone in thinking they were on one kind of a mission to save the Kurds, to save Iraq from despotism, to save the world from weapons of mass destruction. And there are many layers to every war, but these particular units had suddenly found they were doing this other stuff. And so people are very tactful when they come to me. They don't always say who they are, what their title was, what their unit was doing. They'll say, I've heard from peers, is usually how it goes. And I've now discovered that the conversations I'm having of that kind, Erich von Daniken had the same kinds of conversations back in the day. I'm reading a book by a guy called Barry Dowling, who was a Christian minister writing in the field of paleocontact in the 1960s. He had the British RAF, people from the RAF, saying, can we have a meeting with you and talk to you? And the reason this happens is that, for instance, the RAF people he mentions, their job was to report any kind of UFO encounters and then not ask any questions about it. So who could they ask? They asked their peers, but they certainly couldn't ask the higher up. And so then they said, well, let's ask Barry Dowling, who's been writing about it. The Advanced Propulsion Unit of NASA said, well, let's talk to Erich von Daniken about this. And now I'm getting people saying, well, let's talk to Paul Wallis about this, because we know about it, we've had some exposure, but we can't ask the higher ups. And so there is a connection between paleocontact and what's happening right now. Things that are being looked for, things that are being reverse engineered, contact that we have, how does it relate to contact in the past? And so that's why, I mean, I thought I was writing in a nice, neatly ring-fenced field of paleocontact, and I discovered, no, I have to be involved in contact, that conversation about contact in the present. I have to be involved in conversations.
Will you come closer to your mic? You're kind of getting a little muffled. I don't know if it's because you're getting away from the mic. There you go. Now you're better.
Make sure I'm still nice and loud. So it's very difficult just to stay within your pen when all these things join up, and when
because they're all connected.
Yeah, they are all connected. And as I say, there are people who've experienced enough that it's disturbed their world and made them curious. They're trying to get a head around what happened to them, what they saw, what happened to their friends. And if they can't ask the higher ups, then they'll ask the researcher. I was really encouraged just the other day. I heard from a priest in the Church of England who's involved in paranormal ministry. And in the Church of England, every diocese has to have a senior advisor in paranormal ministry. And this usually means things like entity removal.
You're right.
But my friend has worked in parishes where there have been a lot of parishioners who've experienced close encounters. And so they had a national conference for people working in that field. It makes me laugh. They're not allowed to mention UFOs, UAPs, or ETs. They can mention all sorts of other crazy, spooky stuff like entity removal and demonization. But ETs, oh, don't talk about that here. But I was very encouraged that my friend asked the PA to the bishop, who is the senior person over this whole field of ministry in the Church of England. They were having a conversation, and the conversation went, we're talking about cattle mutilations in the New Forest in Dorset in the UK. Yeah. Only the senior advisor didn't talk about cattle mutilations. They used some other word, strange things happening to animals.
I mean, cattle mutilations, but it's too common.
My friend said, oh, do you mean bloodless cattle mutilations? And the senior advisor said, oh, how on earth did you know that? My friend said, well, have you heard of Linda Moulton Howe?
Yeah, welcome to the party, pal. That's
and the senior advisor said, no.
Yeah.
Can you believe they were looking into cattle mutilations? They didn't know who Linda Moulton Howe was. No. But then my friend said, have you heard of the work of Paul Wallis? And the senior advisor said, oh, we get letters every week about him. And I thought, oh, bingo, that's great. I'm being discussed here. But no official response. This goes back to what I was saying earlier. If the Roman Catholic Church can have a whole colloquium about ET contact in 2009, and the Church of England is getting letters every week about my work, but there's no official response, well, that's funny and poor at the same time. I actually think it's very poor because my friend is not the only pastor who has to respond to parishioners who've experienced close encounters. And if the official response is, we don't talk about that, that's not a pastoral response. That's absolutely shameful. And so if I can just provoke conversation at that level a bit further, then I'll have done a good thing, I think.
Because these kind of encounters happen to not just people like us that believe in it. It happens to people that have deep religious faith, and they're looking for help from the people they trust.
Exactly. So
they don't want to be told to shut up.
Process some experience they can't understand. They're trying to get their head around what this does to my faith as well. And if the church doesn't have a pastoral response to that, that's ridiculous. Britain is a dense country. And you and I both know that if you live anywhere near a military base, then you're going to be in a hot spot for anomalous experiences. Think how small Great Britain is. There are millions of British people living in hot spots. Is there no pastoral response to them? So again, this is another thing that motivates me, getting my books out there, pushing the conversation forward, trying to get them to come to the party, get what's known among the academics to be talked about in the churches, what's known by the higher ups to be talked about among the rank and file, so that at the very least, people can talk about the things that have happened to them, and at best can begin exploring what's going on and what the implications are for you and me.
Too bad we can get somebody like Tim Burchett to look into what happened in Iraq during the, all that stuff. I mean, he's looking at the UAP thing, UFOs and reverse engineering, but they got to understand there's an ancient archaeology to this. There's, like I said, I believe we have people on the payroll of these, this secret institution, whatever, that are like Indiana Joneses in a sense that they understand the ancient alien thing. But they're looking for it in the old.
They take it seriously.
Yeah.
So when I responded to the military personnel who contacted me, and they said, for instance, what's the credibility of Stargate technology? I could say, well, I haven't had eyes on, like some of your peers are saying they have, but I can tell you that if there were ancient Stargate technology, then according to the Bible, you would find it in Iraq.
Right.
And scientifically, yes, there's credibility to it, because the Advanced Propulsions Unit of NASA has been exploring the physical functioning of portals for more than 30 years. 30 years ago, they were asking, can we fly a craft into the portal that opens adjacent to planet Earth every 8 minutes? If they were asking that 30 years ago, goodness only knows what they found since. So I could point them to ancient texts and say, this is relevant. Well, if I'm having conversations with military personnel at that level, it's happening at the higher level as well.
Right.
So they
much
are
more knowledge
in ancient texts. They are interested in going to ancient sites. Archaeology is a part of the rationale for warfare around the world. So the things are inextricably linked.
I just picture at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they're taking it and putting it in the warehouse, and they're like, "We have our best men on it." What does happen to these artifacts? Like what happened to the stuff in Iraq? There's been speculation they found the body of Gilgamesh. They found, the Stargate, or they found an ancient ship. You wonder what we gleaned from that was so important, because there was no weapons of mass destruction. We knew that going in. We knew that. There's plenty of intelligence now that's been revealed that we were pretty well clear that we weren't going to find any weapons of mass destruction there.
Well, I think just following the logic of what happened around Gilgamesh, for instance, there was, lots of fanfare and song and dance as we were going in. And so Jörg Fassbinder, who was the academic leader of that archaeological mission, talked to the BBC and said, we're 99% certain we've identified the sarcophagus of Gilgamesh. Well, clearly the opportunity was to test the materials, because you could then either verify or falsify the story of paleocontact. The Sumerians said Gilgamesh was a hybrid. We could test for that.
A giant, wouldn't he?
Yeah, so you've only got to measure the sarcophagus, let alone if you can get any kind of DNA data from that sarcophagus. The logic is that if you found it and there was nothing to report, you'd report it. It's only if there was something earth-shattering to report that the story would go silent, and the story went silent. It went silent. It's the same pattern that happened with ufology in Roswell. But prior to Roswell, encounters were reported publicly, and the military were meeting the press and saying, we're pursuing them, we're going to try and shoot one down, we'll find out what they are, we'll find out where they're from.
Project Sign, Project Blue Book.
When we find out. And then day after Roswell, it goes to silence. The logic is they found out, but they didn't want to share the information. And so I think following stories that reach a dead end really tell you quite a lot. And it's the same logic I would apply if people want to review the footage of the congressional hearing on July 26th. Just take note every time that the witnesses say,
we'll have to talk about that by closed door.
Answer that. That'll have to be in a skiff. Well, that tells you there's something to see here.
Yeah.
There's an answer to that question.
Just you can't handle the truth. You don't need to know the truth. That's the thing. I'm interested in what happens with this closed door meeting with Tim Burchett and the others.
Sure.
Because, okay, if he can't come out and just say what he's shown because it's classified, I get it. But that will even more empower him and others to keep pursuing it if there's actual real information given.
I applaud Tim Burchett's courage in pursuing the matter, and Andy Ogles as well. My concern is that we're not going to help ourselves if we frame the whole thing in militaristic terms.
But that's what they keep doing.
If we frame the whole conversation in terms of national threat, existential threat, and I know that's been his concern.
Yeah.
And I think if we allow that fear and then the energy of, I don't know what to call it, exasperation between Congress and the Pentagon to shape the conversation, that's not going to move us forward in a healthy way at all.
No.
Because I believe there is potential for things to go in positive directions if we can embrace all the contact that's available to us. Our ancestors said we had helpers from Sirius, we had helpers from the Pleiades. And if they are among the factions around the table, then it's not all about existential threat. It's about the potential for humanity to make another great leap forward. In the past, contact meant rapid progress in agronomy, rapid progress in food science, rapid progress in materials science. And it could mean that all over again if we frame our conversations right and not turn it into, it's not even a friend or foe conversation at the moment. It's just assumed foe. And we've got to snap out of that mentality. So I just hope they don't show Tim things that are only going to terrify him.
Well, look, you talk about rapid progress. We went from the Wright brothers flying the first plane to 60-something years later, us going to the moon. We've had rapid progress in the last 100 years when it comes to technology, and we're about ready to take quantum leaps forward. So a part of me feels like this disclosure is happening because these private corporations, Raytheon, Boeing, they have had technology they're ready to purport to the public, but it's starting to get so advanced that they're going to have to let the cat out of the bag somewhat where they got it from.
I do think we are on the cusp of it. I think we really are on the brink of it. And that technological leap is what's going to change our politics, our economics, and our relationship with our neighbors.
Just think if we're able, NASA is getting more and more into the idea of the Kubereri warp field theory, kind of, where they're trying to find ways to bend space, time, imagine, right now we're trying to reach Mars with rockets still. The technology people are reporting that the UFOs have, and what Bob Lazar even talked about, would just make all that obsolete. All the stuff we're doing right now with SpaceX and everything would be, you're way behind.
Yes, it would. And it was clear that Ed Mitchell believed that we have access to that kind of technology already. Whether we can reverse engineer it or not, we have access to it. And I can't forget Neil Armstrong's choice of words at the 25th anniversary celebration of his lunar landing in, 1994. He said, there are breakthroughs available. Not they will be available, not might be available. There are breakthroughs available to those willing to peel back one of truth's protective layers. Now, those might be cryptic words, but what can that possibly mean if he doesn't mean declassifying technology we already have access to?
Yep.
I think that's what that means.
Neil Armstrong always fascinated me because of what he did with his life after the moon landing. He got obsessed with ancient cultures and traveling the world.
Exactly. You've got that on the one hand, and then you've got Ed Mitchell, who devoted his life to human consciousness. And expanding our sensitivities and higher cognitive abilities. These things are all of a piece. And I find when I go into indigenous cultures and read ancestral texts, ancient texts, hear ancient narratives, they all tie together. Higher cognitive powers, human consciousness, ancient experiences, and what's happening right in the present. You cannot separate them.
And people think of, and I always say when people think of a lot of times it's portrayed aliens have this higher technology, anti-gravity and teleportation and portals and all this stuff, but they always forget the other element is that they also could have a spiritually higher technology in a sense.
Well, they may or may not, because
There's obviously
as we said earlier.
Yeah,
some of the contact we read about, particularly in the Bible, is not very elevated.
No prime directive there going on. You know what I'm saying?
And we shouldn't assume that just because some neighbors have got better tech than us, they're morally more advanced. I mean, the history of Earth tells you that.
Oh yeah, I completely agree.
What I'm tech are not necessarily the better people. So, but the reason I mentioned that is that I think some of the interest we have is here because of us, because of our higher spiritual capabilities, because of our higher emotional abilities. I think there is something unique about the blend of Homo sapiens. All life in the cosmos might be ultimately related, but the environment has been particular here. Our story's been particular. And I think we've got a unique blend of animal strength, mammal emotion, higher cognitive abilities. That means that Homo sapiens have got a facility of compassion, imagination, love, creativity that is different to some of our neighbors. I think we have the potential to enjoy life in ways some of our neighbors don't. The pleasure we derive from one another, from food, from music, from color, from spiritual experiences. I don't think all our neighbors have this. And
no, I
agree.
Think
it's because of our spiritual elevation that some of the company is here saying, we want some of this action. We want some of this in our gene pool. And some are saying we want our descendants to live here because we want them to have what the humans have. Which then gets a little bit complicated, but it just shows there's a bit more color to the story, and
or maybe it's that we're in tune with something that. Well, you talk about that, we get into this picture though that we are reaching states of consciousness like Jesus is talking about his Father. He's talking about something greater than the ancient aliens. You know, I'm saying that we're able to contact something spiritually that's a higher in itself. You could call it an alien or whatever, but it's interdimensional. It's a higher consciousness. Other beings that are of a more spiritual like of nature and in power. It's not technology. You know what I'm saying? They've advanced, like, not that they're a great example in Star Trek because Q's kind of a jerk, but the Q continuum, like, I'm saying that they don't travel in ships. They are literally mentally able to do things that are godlike.
Yes. Well, I think that's right. And I think, among the company we have, some will be very sort of nuts and bolts, 3-dimensional or 4-dimensional entities like us. But I think interdimensional beings are part of the picture.
Yeah.
Part of the ancient picture and part of the reality today. And when Plato talked about contact, he had that concept in his mind as well. And what is wonderful about Plato's contribution is when he talks about contact, he's not talking about a couple of aliens turning up to a skiff in Arlington or in Washington. He's talking about contact at a grassroots level between ordinary human beings and hard to imagine interdimensional entities who want to support human progress and who will actually interact with individual human beings because they love doing that, because they love supporting the human story at that kind of micro level. That gives me hope. I mean, if I really thought the entire human story was in the hands of Admiral Wilson's corporate types in a spliff in the USA, I'd be worried. But I think Plato's got an insight here that can give us reassurance that our visitor's interest is not just with corporate types and politicians, it's with all of us. And there is a much bigger conversation happening right now than just the one going on in Washington.
I mean, if you look, I believe there's, the collective unconscious, there's these higher power. I believe in like what I call the force. That's my version of what I believe God is. I don't believe in ancient aliens as my God. I think that's what Jesus was trying to get across. I believe people like Nikola Tesla, the reason he came up with this, not just that he was brilliant, but that he tuned into something on a higher level that gave us technologies and stuff. We could have had free energy if it wasn't for J.P. Morgan. I'm saying? Tesla was trying to give us some great things. And also, he wanted to build death rays, I guess. But, I'm saying that there's something that has progressed us, that's come into our consciousness, not aliens giving us technology physically, but coming into our perceived consciousness as we expand. How many people were inventing the phone at the same time? There's things that human civilizations, we're on a path that's our consciousness is expanding.
Yes, that's right. And again, the ancients talk about contact in those terms, that there has been contact through the ages aimed at encouraging our imagination, heightening our cognitive abilities so that we could make those kinds of leaps forward. And it's interesting to me that there are a lot of stories of great minds through the ages where contact is part of their story. If not theirs, contact experiences that their mothers had. And so the idea that actually the curation of creative, intelligent human beings is happening at that level, that a Pythagoras doesn't appear from nowhere.
Right.
Or an Archimedes, or a Leonardo da Vinci.
Right.
That the appearance of these people, Lao Tzu, the Yellow Emperor, Buddha, Jesus, they're all examples of leaps forward, not just in technology, but in human thought, human philosophy, and understanding of how we can live together. The idea that is assisted, and has been for a long, long time, again, gives me hope that we are not having to navigate the 21st century all on our own, desperately trying to broker communication.
Yeah, there's a light at the end of the tunnel that's trying to encourage us to be our best selves. Is my feeling. I call it the Force, God, whatever.
Exactly.
But it's encouraging us to open our minds to these things.
I think you can either read Plato or you can go to the grassroots to hear these stories. Because I think if you go to traditional healers in any culture, they'll say what I just said.
Yep.
That there's contact at that level. It's for the grassroots. It's for human beings. It's for our health, welfare, and progress. And I find that a much more hopeful way of framing the story of contact than Mars attacks or invasion of the body snatchers.
Yes, exactly. Well, Paul, it's been excellent having you on. I can't wait for your new... we were talking about the Eden Conspiracy. I can't wait for your new book, too, Invasion of Eden, when that comes out. You said April?
That's right. Early April, The Invasion of Eden will be appearing in paperback form on Amazon.
I will have to get that copy of the book, and we'll have to get you back on to talk about it more. Because I'm sure there's going to be a lot more that probably happens. We'll see. We'll get to talk about what happens behind this skiff. Maybe. Yeah, we'll see if there's anything to talk about. Hopefully. Definitely. Hopefully something.
There'll be something.
All right. Well, thank you, Paul. Everybody go check out the Eden Conspiracy. Go check out Fifth Kind TV on YouTube. It's a great YouTube channel there. You have such wonderful material, podcasts. I'm listening to them all the time. And Jamie and her mom are listening to them too. You guys should definitely check it out. Thank you, Paul, again. Next week, we got another Paul, my other favorite Paul Blake Smith. We're going to be talking about his last book, The Nixon Gleason Alien Encounter. It's his most recent one, and I just got that. Right here, I just got that in the mail today. I can't wait to start reading that this week to have Paul Blake Smith on next Sunday. Same bad time, same bad channel, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Central, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. 11 p.m. Specific time. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Don't forget to check us out Patreon if you want to help support the show. $2 a month, $1 a month, $10 a month, super fan. Either way, you can chat with me on our Patreon message boards there. If you want to get a hold of me, that's a great way, and it helps support the show. And don't forget, Super Chat on YouTube is another way to donate, helps pay the bills. Thanks for everybody for watching. Thanks to those who share. See you next Sunday. Have a great night.